WINN is 98.9. 98.9 is Win FM.
People make the world go round.
Well, a very good morning to you. Time now to welcome you to Inside the News on Win FM 98.9. Inside the News broadcast on Saturdays and rebroadcast on Sundays. On to this program, we're very happy to have with us the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. Timothy Harris, as well as the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Hazel Laws. We'll continue our discussions on the country's response to COVID-19. That's coming up in just a moment, but first of all, we want to say a very good morning to our colleague stations that are taking this broadcast. And of course, we're on many platforms on YouTube, Facebook, and of course, via the old-time radios. You used to know it. Let's say a very good morning now to our sponsors, The Cable.
As social distancing becomes the norm of our everyday life, The Cable wants you, our customer, to know that we are here for you every day. Just log into us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Send us your feedback at email customerservice@thecable.biz. Visit our website www.thecable.net. It's also nice to know you can pay your bills at a distance, online at all commercial banks, or at www.thecable.net/pay. Now's the time to try online banking. It's ultra easy. Call us at 465-2588, 662-7742, or 763-0184. The Cable. We're here for you.
Well, a very good morning to you once again. I'm Clive Bacchus, and with me I have Trent Sargent providing technical support. We're happy to be in the company of the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis and the Chief Medical Officer. As is our tradition, we'll begin first of all with a statement from the Prime Minister, then we'll hear from the Chief Medical Officer, then we'll pose a few questions, and then of course we'll be happy to hear from you on our telephone lines, which I'll announce when the time is right. In the meantime, we go now to the Prime Minister. Mr. Prime Minister, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Clive, and good morning to all who are tuning in Radioland and TVland. Thanks for taking the time to be part of this informative session.
Well, thank you so much for being here, and a very good morning to Dr. Hazel Laws. Dr. Laws, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Bacchus, and thanks for having me here this morning.
Well, it's good to see both of you are awake. I don't know, do you sleep?
Not as much.
Well, I know.
I'm working on it.
I know we have a lot of work to do, and of course, I commend you for finding the time to come here to answer questions and to interact with the public. So, without any more from me, let's go to the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. Timothy Harris. Dr. Harris, your opening comments.
Thank you very much again, and good morning to all my fellow citizens and residents. It is a pleasure, once again, to use this forum to have an interactive conversation with the people of St. Kitts and Nevis and all our well-wishers at home and abroad. This week has been an important one. Today we mark the 21-day period for the curfew, which we started sometime in March by regulation number 7. And today we are, in fact, at regulations number 14 of 2020, the statutory rules and orders, emergency powers COVID-19, number 5 regulations. We have, over the last 21 days, had our lives turned upside down, in a manner of speaking, as a result of a pandemic which originated in Wuhan, China, so far away from us that none of us had anticipated that it would reach into the Americas with such rapidity and intensity. But that is now ancient history. The reality is that the worst pandemic ever in the world, certainly the most significant one in living memory, is now with us. And it has been moving so swiftly and unpredictably that the world order has changed. The health systems that were considered among the best are now in turmoil. We only have to listen to the news coming out of United States of America, coming out of United Kingdom, coming out of Europe, coming from every region of the world, to understand that this is no laughing matter. The reality is, and if I could get from the CMO the situation analysis report, is that as of Friday, 17th April at 3 p.m., over 2,078,605 cases of COVID-19 were confirmed. It has left in its pathway 139,515 persons. In other words, in the short of a couple months, because this was declared an emergency health challenge of international concern on or around January, if not the end of December, and within a few months, 139,515 persons have died, and several thousands more are in hospitals, in ICUs, and in other wards. And we have hundreds of thousands more who are unable to make it to hospitals because the hospitals in the underlands are, as it were, overcrowded and bursting to their seams. And even if they were to get to that destination, there is a shortage of critical equipment, both for the health givers, providers, and for those who will be there as patients. I say that to, as it were, bring and highlight the serious pandemic which we are dealing with. 139,515 people dead is like 3 times the size of St. Kitts and Nevis population loss. So if we could put that in this context, and therefore we in St. Kitts and Nevis have to be very careful. I am grateful and thankful that God has blessed us so far. And while we would have wished in the ideal situation that there would be no confirmed cases, the reality is that we have 14. But to God, we give the honor. We have no deaths so far. And we have been doing our very best to lead the way and to lead the region with respect to this fight against humanity that the COVID-19 represents. I want to use the opportunity to thank all the essential workers, in particular those at the front line, our health practitioners, our nurses, those who drive our ambulances, those at immigration, at customs, the defense force, the police, and all the other agencies too numerous to mention, those at NEMA, and the members of the National Emergency Operating Center and our Health Emergency Operating Center are among the thousands of persons who I must thank. Equally, I want to thank the vast majority of people for St. Kitts and Nevis, who over the last 21 days, were able to come to terms with the fact that we are in a new world. We may protest against it. We certainly don't like it. It has been inconvenient for all of us, and it has been a difficult experience for many, for our elderly, for those who have been put out of work through no fault of their own, for those who are on reduced wages. All of us have suffered, and your government has suffered too, because your burden becomes our burden. Your fears becomes our fears. Your needs are what we respond to every day. And so to ensure that we can move forward, the government from day one indicated that we will spare no resource to be able to ensure that St. Kitts and Nevis fight this fight with all it has. Fight the fight with every intention of winning. 21 days after, the fight is still going on, and we have not yet won. Many have been battered and worn down, but our spirit of resilience, of commitment, of resourcefulness, they live on. And we are prepared to fight every day with all the sinews in our body to ensure we defeat COVID-19. And we have set ourselves as a government and people the aspirational goal that St. Kitts and Nevis will be the first or among the first in the region to successfully defeat COVID in our jurisdiction. Now we go to what happened yesterday. What happened yesterday was that we went to the Parliament, the fulcrum of democracy, to get the support of the Parliament as the emergency powers require that we do, and the Constitution, to be able to extend the Emergency Powers Act and the regulations attendant to, referred to as the Emergency Powers COVID-19 regulations. And we successfully had the two-thirds majority in the House. Indeed, with the absence of the vacating of the seat of the member for number 6, with the long-term absence now of the Senator Nigel Carty. It was, and the absence yesterday too, at the time of voting, of the Honorable Patrice Nisbet, we went well over the required two-thirds majority to pass, and we were happy that we were able to. Why did we need it? So many people are exposing themselves at the front line. The health practitioners, the nurses, those who are working in the health systems everywhere, in every health center, in every of the 4 hospitals in St. Kitts and Nevis, our police, all of them need to ensure that they have every tool and every asset in our arsenal to be able to wage a winning war against a powerful, invisible enemy. And the state of the emergency powers and attendant regulations are critical in the fight against COVID-19. COVID-19 in large respect depend upon people using their common sense and their good sense to act. But in every sphere of human endeavor, there are going to people who will not do the right thing, because at times doing the right thing is difficult to do. Doing the right thing sometimes requires you to stand alone in defense of principle. And so if in the state of where we are now, persons determine, well, I am not going to take on the doctors, I am not even going to bother with the police, I am going to have a black party on the street, I am going to go to the beach because I am free to do what I want in this country, and I will have this party and all this fun. And the more people congregate, whatever the occasion, the increase in the risk of the transmission of the COVID-19. And one of the strategic plans outlined by the health professionals is that we have to minimize the probability of transmission from one human being to another. And that calls for a number of things to be observed. The social distancing and physical distancing, people keeping a safe distance between themselves, people taking conscious effort to boost their immune system by proper rest, and you ask a pertinent question. Sleep is part of that. Dieting, healthy intakes of vitamins and fruits, etc. All those things are going to put us in a better way. Hand hygiene in particular, but sanitary practices in general, all now become crucially important. And of course, the ability of the state to respond quickly, to move people from point A to point B, and to require people to disperse for any length of period of time could only come with the support of the emergency powers. So no one in St. Kitts and Nevis, in my view, having regard to where we are at, having regard to what is happening in the world, and they see it in every news item, no matter what TV channel they go to that deals with news, know that when the emergency powers ended, think it was this morning, at 6 o'clock, there was no way that the government could leave the people of St. Kitts and Nevis exposed to the whims and fancy of the other individual. Because no matter how much I protect myself by wearing my mask, by observing social distancing, by communicating with my God at home on my knees at my bedside, or through television, or participating virtually, so long as there are others not observing these practices, there is a risk to me. And that is why the state need the powers of coercion, if you will, to discipline people and to provide the consequences for people not adhering to proper rules in the public interest. And the public interests at this time are of twofold. Predominantly a public health pandemic. None can argue it because it is clearly all over the world. And I want to make the point anyway and repeat it. No country stands alone. So even if St. Kitts and Nevis were to be the first to achieve its aspirational goal, and Antigua is not, and St. Martin has not, and Guadeloupe has not, and America has not, we are not yet out of the woods. And the clear message from every knowledgeable health professional and COVID czar is that no one truly knows when the course will be clear. What persons are saying to government and to those who are policymakers, we have to go about it in a very slow way. Even this morning I listened to the Director General of WHO, Dr. Tejas, and he was saying that he is aware that countries are wanting to move apace, to get, as it were, to the next phase of operation, to a greater an enlargement of freedoms hitherto constrained. And he's saying, yes, each country has to know what it is doing, but please go slowly. It has to be a gentle process, learning as you go, taking the tender steps, one step at a time, and evaluating the success of that measure. Whether you need to club up what which you have done, it is a season and a period of trial and error. And we and every country will have to go through that phase of trial and error, being agile enough and quick enough to be able to make the changes. That is what these powers, the emergency powers, allow us to do. So if there was, for example, something significantly untoward happening on Monday, when we release some of the restrictions, remove some of the restrictions, so Monday, for example, and Tuesday, you can go out if you are compelled to. You can come into Bastille, whatever your zone, but come only if necessary, because we still want you to stay at home unless there's a compelling reason. Now, the reason may be for medication. The reason may be that you have to work. And we could have legitimate purposes, but it can't be that I come in town to lie. We do not want that. In fact, we will insist that there be no loitering on 4th Street and on any street in Bastille and in any community. You must come out for a reason, because the stay in shelter is still a critical matter to contain things within particular physical abodes or households. So if something were to happen, what this power that we got yesterday to extend the curfew, the emergency powers for a period of 6 months, what it does, it gives us an additional tool to help fight the pandemic. It is necessary and it was imperative that we do so. And clearly, informed Kittitians and Nevisians, when they listen to Jamaica, they hear that they are exercising emergency powers. Jamaica suddenly had about 30 plus cases discovered in one call center. And what was the response of the government, among other things? The one that made the headlines was that the Jamaican government immediately executed the powers of the state of the emergency, locked down the parish affected so that you could contain the movement of people in and out, and therefore minimize the spread of the transmission of the virus, for which up to today, at least this morning, there was no known vaccine or therapy. None at all. This is a strange place to be. And that is why we must never relax our guard. And the commitment of the Team Unity administration is that health come first. Yesterday we had something oil being poured in the water, where some persons attempted to confuse people. This was an effort to delay elections. I want to make it clear that what we did yesterday has nothing to do with general elections. I want to make it further clear that elections are not on the mind of the Prime Minister at this time. And only the Prime Minister, according to the Constitution, will be able to determine when the elections are called. I could not dare to be thinking selfishly and conveniently about the general elections when people's health are basically at risk. In the face of a pandemic, we couldn't seriously be thinking about holding public meetings to expose people when one of the critical truths or best practices is that people have to be apart. In the context of the way in which we campaign, that would be anathema for this to happen during the course of a campaign. And so my priority, my government's priority, the priority for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis is to allow the government to do its work to get the country to a safer space. Yesterday I used the metaphor of crossing the Red Sea in biblical times, crossing that sea out of Egypt into Canaan land, the land of prosperity and the land of safety. That is the challenge now, and that is what is operating on my mind, inspired by the hard work of people like Dr. Hazel and Dr. Cameron Wilkinson and Dr. Liddy and the permanent secretary and all those people in health who are sacrificing daily. And because I see them sacrificing, I know as the leader, my sacrifice must be even be greater, because leadership comes by example. And I want to inspire the people of St. Kitts and Nevis in this period of difficulty, which we are easing. Already then, you can see that we have no interest in delaying anything, because we are working out, easing, getting the country to normalcy. And if next week goes beautifully, people conduct themselves well, 99% of the people on the street come out with their masks of any type, and we have masks in abundance now. Sun Island can produce, by my own calculation, 10 to 15,000 masks per week. We have a mere 50,000 people, and some are already taken care of in the health sector, in the security. So everyone can. And if you don't want to buy those, you can certainly wear your own. So this is where I want to end my opening remarks by thanking the people of St. Kitts and Nevis for clearly, had it not been that the 21-day period, and Dr. Laws could speak some more of that, had brought sufficient success, the health personnel who have been advising us would not have been able to come to say, Mr. Prime Minister and your cabinet, these are options available to you. Ultimately, the government takes responsibility for the advice. For in a democracy, the deciders are the people, who people elect to make decisions on their behalf. And we will take all advice but ultimately the responsibility is us. It's for us to do. So I want to thank Dr. Hazel Laws for being an excellent daughter of St. Kitts and Nevis, a remarkable professional who has come to the country, has settled down in a difficult job, and we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. So I say thanks to her. I want to also say, in making decisions, it's not just the health personalities who give advice. We hear from the NEOC, which is a larger body. We hear, of course, from the security forces. Because when we are going to do things like these, we have to ask the Commissioner of Police and his High Command and the Lieutenant Colonel at the Defense Force. Can this be of assistance to you? How you are going to work it? Before we could make a final decision about zoning, we have to bring them in. Hear what they're saying, hear what the health personalities are saying, and see where there is symmetry, where there is commonality, where when there is difference, we could, as it were, bring some agreement and resolution. So the health personnel, critical resource. Security, a critical resource. Indeed, both of them are intertwined because the pandemic has raised a more significant health risk for security everywhere. And that is why one of the standard responses has been lockdown, as it were, the ports of entry. Do not allow other persons to come across the border unless it is properly managed. Again, I want to thank the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. Your discipline, your hard work, your contribution to this effort has put us in a better place to be able to withstand the pandemic and to see a light at the end of the tunnel where St. Kitts and Nevis must emerge stronger, safer, and better for it. It has been a sacrifice for all of us, for me, for my cabinet, for each of us. But it is a sacrifice that could bring years of prosperous living to us. So, small sacrifice for future gains. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris, for your opening comments on Inside the News today. We'd now like to invite opening remarks from the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Hazel Laws.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bacchus, for opportunity to give my own opening remarks this morning. On March 11, 2020, the WHO declared the COVID-19 outbreak a pandemic, and our Honorable Prime Minister just described in detail the seriousness of the battle that we are all engaged in. And I want to use this opportunity at this time to underscore that in St. Kitts and Nevis, the Ministry of Health started its preparedness and response to this outbreak from as far back as early January 2020. As far back as January 23rd, we, the Ministry of Health, started strengthening our surveillance at our ports of entry. There has been early action and implementation of comprehensive public health measures, such as massive education campaign, sensitizing the public about hand hygiene practices, and behavioral changes like social and physical distancing to reduce the risk to coronavirus. Practices like rapid case identification, rapid testing, and isolation of cases, comprehensive contact tracing, and quarantine of contacts. At present, the Federation has one of the highest rates of testing per capita in the Caribbean. Let me repeat. At present, the Federation has one of the highest rates of testing per capita in the Caribbean. For the Ministry of Health, testing is a priority. We have suppressed the spread of COVID-19 below the threshold at which the health system becomes unable to prevent excess mortality. I want to use this forum to assure the public that we have a passionate team of health professionals seated at the Health Emergency Operating Center within the Ministry of Health, leading the Federation's response to this outbreak. We are not out of the woods as yet. Again, I repeat, we are not out of the woods as yet. The number of confirmed cases of COVID-19 will continue to rise. It will eventually peak, and we know that the way down is much slower than the way up. Dr. Carissa Etienne, the director of the Pan American Health Organization, in a press release dated April 15, 2020, warned the region to prepare for a full blast within the next few weeks. Dr. Etienne went on to advise that focusing on social distancing remained country's best bet to reduce transmission and slowing the spread of the virus. The declaration of the state of emergency in St. Kitts and Nevis on March 28 facilitated the required social and physical distancing measures. Yesterday, the National Assembly deemed it necessary to extend the state of emergency for a period of 6 months. Now, over the past Easter weekend, we had 6 days of 24-hour curfew. And during the upcoming week, we will have 4 days of partial curfew with limited days of operation between 6 a.m. in the morning and 7 p.m. in the evening. Now, this move can be described as a gradual relaxation of measures, and the Ministry of Health was guided by the World Health Organization in making this serious decision. The World Health Organization provided us with 6 criteria that countries should use to guide their decision-making process in terms of lifting restrictions. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to assure you that the Ministry of Health, we really studied these 6 criteria ahead of making our recommendations to the Cabinet. These criteria included, first, we needed to ensure that the transmission is controlled. Second, that the health system capacities are in place to detect, test, isolate, and treat every case and trace every contact. Thirdly, that the outbreak risks are minimized in special settings like health facilities, nursing homes, and other long-term care facilities. Fourth, that preventive measures are in place in workplaces, schools, and other places where it's essential for people to work. Fifth, that importation risks can be managed. As you know, our borders are closed. And sixth, that communities are fully educated, engaged, and empowered to adjust to the new norm. And so that's another reason why the Honorable Prime Minister and myself are here this morning. In essence, strict control measures can only be lifted if the right public health measures are in place, including significant capacity for contact tracing and testing and the legal framework for social and physical distancing. The key thing is to transition away from restrictions in a manner that will enable suppression of transmission at a low level, whilst enabling the resumption of some parts of economic and social life. And I want to end my opening comments with a little hope.
Yes.
When I woke up this morning, I usually try to find out the latest about COVID that's happening across the globe. And I was, pleasantly surprised by the article issued by Bloomberg.com. And the heading, Virus Vaccine May Be Ready for Mass Production by Autumn, Oxford professor says. Now, the article went on to say that a coronavirus vaccine trial by University of Oxford researchers aims to get efficacy results by September of this year. And they claim that manufacturing is already on the way. A team led by Professor Sarah Gilbert, professor of vaccinology at the University of Oxford, has recruited 500 volunteers from the ages of 18 to 55 years from early to mid-stage randomized controlled trials. It will be extended to older adults and then to the final stage of the trial, in which 5,000 persons will be recruited. And I quote, "We would hope to have at least some doses that are ready to be used by September of this year." And the article went on to say that the World Health Organization acknowledges 70 vaccine candidates on the market as we speak. And so for me, this is very, very hopeful. So thank you, Mr. Bacchus.
And thank you very much, Dr. Hazel Laws, for your opening comments. And we're now going to go to questions for the Prime Minister. We did ask people to submit their questions for us. So when you have the Prime Minister in the House, you want to get the best questions. So we have some questions here for the Prime Minister. And then, of course, we will take some calls from our listeners first. Mr. Prime Minister, are you ready, sir?
I am ready.
Excellent, sir. All right, the first question I have for you today. August 12th is the deadline for elections unless there are hostilities with another country. Is it, sir, constitutional to have a state of emergency beyond that date? That's your first question. I'm going to give you two at a time. The second question is, in the context of state of emergency, can you again explain why 6 months and not a shorter period, based on whether or not the 6-month window was based on the advice of medical professionals? Your responses, sir.
Thank you. I think the last one I will start with. For part of the explanation for the need for the extension of the state of emergency was given in the responses which our chief medical officer gave when she outlined the criteria that the WHO has set for relaxation of some of the restrictions. And in particular, she spoke to the need for the legal framework that would support the social and physical distancing. You need the legal framework. And the legal framework, by and large, is provided again in the emergency powers COVID-19 regulations. So that was essential. We could get in a never-ending argument about length of time. What I would say to you, that the Constitution provides for the state of emergency to go for a period of 12 months or shorter. What we have done, by and large, and the original draft which was produced by the Attorney General provided for 12-month period or shorter. So the first answer, we are acting within a constitutional frame, because that is what the reference to the August deadline for election is about, whether we are going to abide by the Constitution. And so by similar analogy, the answer as to the time for the state of the emergency is whether it meets the constitutional test. And that is, yes, it does. There's a second answer perhaps hidden. Was it a reasonable time? I would say, yes, it was reasonable. It was reasonable because it does no transgression to the Constitution. Secondly, the phraseology of the imposition was that it can be 6 months or shorter. So it means that it could be for 6 weeks. We don't know how long we will need it. It could be for 2 months. It can be for 3 months. Equally, it may well be that we may have to go back to the Parliament if certain unforeseen developments occur to ask for an even longer period of time. What is important is that we observe, as the CMO is doing, from day to day, what is the landscape like with respect to COVID-19. No one, not the CMO, not Dr. Tejas, who spoke this morning about it, not Dr. Etienne at Paho, knows how long this thing would last. All of them are saying, you must exercise precaution. What we have done is to provide a legislative framework that gives us ample room for the health situation to be under control. And I started in the beginning that our response to COVID in terms of emergency has nothing at all to do with the general elections. We have ample time. Why are we arguing about August? Let us try to live, because the COVID response is a day-by-day working a plan. Let us see how the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or even month of it will work. And then we could come back as rational beings and argue whether there is a need for a shortening of it or a lengthening of it. In any event, as the legislation is now drafted, it presupposes that there can be a shortening. The Attorney General was also absolutely clear in rebutting the nonsense and the false argument being put by the opposition that it was a stalling tactic, that at any moment in time, and I think he quoted Section 98 of the Constitution, the Governor General can revoke it. Indeed, the proclamation is in the name of the Governor General. It is the Governor General who must satisfy himself that the circumstances are such that there is a real and present threat as a result of the pandemic. I trust the good judgment of the Governor General every day. I go to him regularly for advice, and this matter I held extensive discussion with the Governor General, who is one of the most senior, thoughtful, knowledgeable, and brilliant minds alive today in St. Kitts and Nevis. He was our Attorney General prior to independence, and he continued as the longest-serving Attorney General of the country. He is the framer of the Constitution, so he knows it inside out. And even while we were debating, I called His Excellency the Governor General to get certain advice and input with respect to the matter. So I am very happy to say that the time frame of 6 months is very reasonable, and the time can be shorter, but we have to go week by week. Even while we are asking not to tie the hand of the professionals, the medical fraternity, the security fraternity, we are saying, where possible, let us do an easement. That is not the mindset of somebody who wants not to have the freedoms available so that an election can be called. We are, by this very move of easement, creating an environment of getting closer, approximating normalcy. Again, separate it from your mind, for I have separated it. I know what the law say. As a Prime Minister, I have to brief myself from time to time. I have professional advice on it, and I know all the options, or most of them, that are available to the country and to the cabinet. And for this moment in time, elections are not a consideration. My first job, and the first job of every government, is to protect its people. There is no constitutional invitation for a government to jeopardize the health of its citizens and residents for the purposes of an election. There is none. Nowhere will that happen. That is why we see, for example, and although I'm going there reluctantly, that even in Anguilla, opposition and government agree that they were not going to put the people of Anguilla's health at risk by focusing on an election. Because at this period of time, we need an all-of-society approach. Whatever contribution the opposition can make, they have been invited time and time again to come to the established structures and put forward their positions in relation to the matters. I have sat with the Chamber of Industry and Commerce before the onslaught of this, discussing, for example, the offshore sector and the Bankers Association. And when we had this, the Chamber of Industry and Commerce sent a letter congratulating the government for the stimulus package and say, at a reasonable time, because we know you are in an emergency, we want to have a dialogue with you. I've seen the lady president and said to her, we would welcome that. We have sat with the religious community, the evangelical, and the Christian Council. They have been some of the strongest supporters of the initiative. And we say, to God be the glory. So we don't have a situation where the police has to go into any church, as had happened in Antigua and in Jamaica, because people felt that they had a spiritual right not to go with the laws of the land, not recognizing that the legitimate authorities are ordained by God and they have a duty to obey. That is why you must give unto Caesar that which is of Caesar's. And so we have gone that road. 6 months quite adequate, and there is no relationship, to answer the first one, between this and the elections. Hopefully we will have enough time to have a discussion with respect to the elections and the way forward. For now, let us focus on saving lives. For saving lives, the life may be mine, it may be yours, it may be all of us. And if there is no healthy people, then there ain't a reason for us to be able to engage in a vigorous democracy to which we had hitherto been accustomed. I want to make the last point, that I believe strongly in the democratic systems. When I look at some societies in the Far East and elsewhere, and people put forward them as a model, I tend to tell people the discipline that naturally ignites in a society where there is a commandist infrastructure doesn't obtain in normal democratic society. And that is why for things like, for example, stealing and certain other voices and crimes, they hardly hear them being of any consequences in a society like Cuba or China or Russia. It just becomes alien in terms of the discipline and in terms of the power of the state to guide, to direct, and to control. And so when people, for example, look at Singapore model, look at China, look at this, you look at their history of engagement, and you know those societies, naturally societies bring a different form of adherence to direction and to guidance. And I want even to move, because it's not an attack on the systems, it's just looking at the realities of them. And every system have their highs and their lows, their good and the bad. But we can't take things out of their rich context. And that is why the WHO said, each country, these are the standard, but you have to do the delicate balancing between the lived reality of your people. If I were to go to Guyana, I've never ceased to be amazed at the amount of ground provisions that are there. And I always want my St. Kitts and Nevis to come like Guyana. That when you go in Pegasus, where I used to frequent, almost everything there is local. The beef, the this, the that. But that had come after many years of practice, where the Guyanese person was taught to buy and to support local. There was a national pride, a sense of national commitment, that you were a true Guyanese in a manner of speaking if you were supportive of certain things. The Burnham era was about the Guyanese clothes, the Guyanese attire, the Guyanese personality, and those things took a long time to get inculcated. I gave a long answer because
no, your
it
answer
was
is welcome.
a complex question.
No, your answer is welcome,
Mr.
Prime Minister. I have two more for you before I go to the Chief Medical Officer. And there's a contention here that's been sent to me that suggests there's an argument from a lawyer that says the AG is wrong. Only the National Assembly can end a resolution passed by the National Assembly. So I'm just putting that there for you to consider. The other one has to do with assurances, and this comes from a gentleman who's asking, can the Prime Minister give assurances that political campaigning by the opposition would not be suppressed, and would he consider calling the date of the elections just to ensure there's calm in St. Kitts and Nevis. Your responses, sir.
Thank you very much. Again, we have to be careful what we wish for and whether we really need it. Because our model of democracy, and they're going back again to whether the age is right or wrong, what we know is very right. In our model of democracy, the Westminster model, the prerogative in most countries is that elections are at the discretion of the Prime Minister to either go early or to go late within the context of the constitutional boundaries. And at this particular moment in time, when I've already said that I am not contemplating a general elections, there's nothing more I could add about timing. There's no time to give. There's no time to give. And there's no need for any lack of calm about it, because it is not in our constitutional fiber and practices for a date to be announced before the Prime Minister is ready. So this will not be introducing an abnormality. With respect to the advice from the Attorney General, that is a matter for debate. But in any event, for me, it is irrelevant. It is irrelevant because the provision says that the state of emergency would and can be for a shorter period of time. And also, at least up until May, as they have pointed to, we could go back to the Parliament and do whatever is necessary. And that is why I said, let us not get all caught up and frantic about it. Let us see how things work. Let us see how the first week goes, how the second week goes, and whether or not there is an imperative. Because, as it were, we still have cards to play. We still have cards to play. And however limited are the time, we still have time again to go back to the Parliament. And I have not taken anything off the table. Nothing is off the table. So it's not that that was the last Parliament. No. If I need to go to Parliament every week until I can't go again, I will. And even when the Parliament is prorogued, the Constitution allows His Excellency the Governor General to summon us back into session. So all is not lost. Let us not take any tool that the state has now off the table. Let us focus on getting St. Kitts and Nevis to the best place. Let us be clear that while people are into conspiracy theories, what is happening? The state is freeing up. The state is giving people an opportunity to shop not just for 2 days, but for 4 days now, and without the constraint of being in its own. So you can go about your legitimate business. More people are going to be working next week. More people in government are going to be out. Farmers are going to be out because the legislation has allowed for extended periods of operations. The bus drivers are going to be able, as part of the easement, to carry more passengers. From about 4, I think the figure is now 8. So more people can move. But even while that is happening, the things that the CMO said were critical, the weighing of the mass becomes even more important if more persons are going to be in public transportation. The social distancing becomes even more important. The sanitation becomes even more important. So we are saying to the busmen, have the sanitizer on the bus. And at frequent intervals, you wipe the knob, you wipe the seats, so that we are minimizing the transmission. That is the precautionary principle that Dr. Tedros and Dr. Carissa Etienne were talking about. And so, again, let us focus on our health. Let's focus on our safety and that of our families and community and the country. And at the critical moment, we could discuss other issues. Elections now are somewhat extraneous, not unimportant because it's part of the democracy, but that has its own time and sequencing. And none of that, as far as we know, is called into context by giving the legal framework to allow the social and physical distancing and all the other imperatives of quarantine and all those other things that are needed to take place so that the country can get to as near a state of normalcy as is important for us to have. In terms of political campaigning, I mean, the response of the opposition really has been starkly political, unpatriotic, but it's part of their freedom. The people will judge whether this is the right time, for example, when a leader of the opposition comes and says, well, pay the people more money. Is this the right time when people should be calling people to answer a call of duty, where every health professional, former and current, should be called to say, at a time of pandemic, would you lend your service to help us somewhere? The first response can't be, well, give us some more money. It's like a nation at war with arms and guns. And the people say, well, the soldiers need some money or they will not fight the war. Then, the country would have lost even before it started. And that doesn't deny that there may be an ample conversation about rewards, but it's the timing that is so indelicate, where duty should at this word be predominant. Duty should be the predominant motivator. We can't try to monetize it because the patriotism must loom large, that the person and the personalities bring everything to bear and this war against the pandemic. So I consider that to be irresponsible electioneering, which will have negative consequence to them. When the Labour Party puts out and invite people to go to Social Security, they are going to be paying your check at a time when one of the most critical things in the set of responses from the medical professional is social distancing. Why are you going to invite people to go to Social Security numbers, to be disappointed, to get in a row, to imperil the health of the workers at Social Security and even their efforts? To me, the opposition is politicking, doing so at a time when the country needs to see national unity, or at least an effort to get there. Constructive ideas. They have not put one position paper to say, Madam CMO, you're in charge of the HEOC. These are what we would like to see. This is what we would like to do. She may say already, I have John Brown, but this is an area I think that you can do. That is her prerogative. They haven't gone to the head of the NEOC and say, can our services be used in health, in planning, in whatever area? Can we give some guidance? No. It's as if some persons want to hold the country to ransom and to put forward an alternative narrative at a time when there could only be one legitimate source of information in the context of war. That is what the WHO director says when he spoke about the misinformation campaign with respect to corona. He said the misinformation is as dangerous as the virus itself. And so when the opposition engages in nitpicking, it is bad politics for them. When instead of being helpful and constructive, they try to undermine and to stir disaffection in the health community and the country, they are not helping themselves. Again, the pandemic knows no color, no class, no region. That is why, as best we know, it originated all the way in Wuhan, China. Look, it's now here in St. Kitts. If you were to know some of the personalities, and I don't know who they are, but you hear names, you know it is no respect of persons. I heard the distinguished representative for East Pasteur in Parliament identify two personalities. All of them our close family or associates of members opposite, but we are in a shared humanity. Their comfort becomes our comfort, and each one has to protect each one. I want to again say to the community, the government is focused on keeping you safe and protect you. The time will come for the party politics. In my view, it is not now, and I am not going to get myself sidetracked into a discussion of elections. That is not on the table at this time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. I have two questions for the CMO, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Hazel Laws. Dr. Laws, you mentioned the comments by Ms. Etienne about the what's coming in the way of the Caribbean. And you've just said St. Kitts and Nevis has reached all the criteria for some relaxation of the curfew, as will happen this week. What do you want to say to our listeners about your expectations as a health professional? And the second part of the question has to do with, of course, the Prime Minister made it very clear that unless there's some adherence to what's expected, there could be stricter measures. Now, some countries have taken the approach of having penalties for people who are found without masks in public places, and people who are not maintaining physical distancing have also been rewarded with fines. Are you at a stage now where you'll be considering perhaps making that sort of a recommendation? I can tell you, in moving around Bastille just yesterday, I saw clearly many people were adhering to your policies.
Yes.
But there are still a few pockets of most, I'm not picking anybody, but particularly young people. I see the guys are watching a bit hard, but young people who feel invincible, and they gather around with their friends, and they take the mask down to speak. And after speaking, they put back up the mask again. I found it quite interesting. But to you, Dr. Laws.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bacchus, for your questions. And in terms of what are our expectations of the public come next week, and to put it simply, we are expecting each and every member or person who lives, who resides here, to exercise a high level of responsibility, personal responsibility in adhering to the measures that we have recommended in terms of hand hygiene, washing your hands before touching, commonly used surfaces, and wearing a face mask while in public spaces, and adhering to the social distancing and physical distancing recommendations. Maintain a nice distance of 6 feet between yourself and others. And even if you are amongst those who are essential workers, or if your organization requests that you come out, make sure it's your responsibility as an individual to adhere to social distancing measures in your workplace, irrespective of the circumstance. And so we expect individuals to buy in and adhere to the recommendations that we have made. You asked about penalties. From where I sit, I would prefer individuals to recognize that it's an all of society response, and as an individual, you recognize the importance of your role in all of this. And so I don't think I want to go down the road of penalties, but if we have buy-in, and it's all about empowering your friend and your neighbor. And so if you are wearing your face mask and you see your friend not wearing one, engage the individual in terms of, okay, so what's happening? Is it that you're unable to source one? Well, I can give you one. And I think we are our brother's keeper. And it's important for us to reach out to those who may not be in compliance, engage them in conversation, encourage and motivate. And I think everybody will be on board if we take that attitude.
And Dr. Laws, my second set of questions for you.
Sorry, before you
Yes, Prime
go,
Minister.
just to say that the regulations, statutory rules, and orders number 14 of 2020 at Regulation 15 says notwithstanding the provisions of the Small Charges Act at Chapter 4.36, a person shall wear a face mask covering their nose and mouth when in a public place, once a period of emergency is declared in relation to COVID-19. So there's a Small Charges Act. Normally you wouldn't see people wearing them. So it says, notwithstanding that, this is what you're required to do in the period in which there is an emergency in relation to COVID-19. And that goes back to the point of what yesterday was about. An emergency specific to COVID-19 and not with respect to the elections. And then I want to take you to Regulation 18, and I will try and get a copy for you, Bacchus. They should be online, though. It says, 19, there is a penalty.
Penalty, yes.
A person who contravenes or fails to comply with these regulations shall be liable on summary conviction to a fine not exceeding $5,000 or a term of imprisonment not exceeding 6 months, or to both, or to forfeiture of any goods or money in respect of which the offense has been committed. So there is a regulation and there is a penalty. Like Dr. Laws, I don't want us to have to take people to court for wearing a mask, to pay $5,000 when you could get a mask for $5, for $10. You could even make your own. I've seen people take parts of their clothing before and make their own that covers their nose and covers their mouths, and all will be well. And this is the point. These are common sense things which are so simple to do as ABC, but yet some people will not do them. And that is why there's a need for emergency powers that give you the legal mechanism to act with some degree of rapidity to protect those of us who are in compliance. Just wanted to add that for completeness.
Ali, thank you very much for that, Mr. Prime Minister, because sometimes you need to be very clear that yes, you're not interested in hurting anybody,
Right.
but there must be compliance for the safety of everybody. Now, in the context of frontline workers, and this is again to Dr. Laws, we take our hats off, of course, to the security forces, the very, very many departments that work very late, the media workers, everybody else. Some of the guys are here. But the medical professionals, the health workers, are even closer on the line because they're treating people who are potentially contagious. What can you say to us about personal protective equipment for healthcare workers in the context? How do you define that? How does it work? And is it something that you have to change regularly? Do you have a supply of it? Could you just educate us about that, please?
Okay, thank you for that question, Mr. Bacchus. Personal protective equipment is the term that encompasses the goggles, face shields, the N95 mask, and the gown that's worn by health professionals who are in direct contact with COVID-positive patients, the gloves and the cover shoes or the overshoes. So again, I repeat, it encompasses the goggles, the face shields, the N95 mask that's worn over the nose and mouth, the gown that's made of an impenetrable material, the gloves, and the overshoes that's worn by the health professional who is required to be in contact with a COVID-positive patient. And so how much do we need? We need as many as we can get, because this is the gear that is worn by all the health professionals who are on the front line in terms of this fight. And as you rightly said, those individuals who are going out to collect samples from suspected cases, going out to interview these contacts and take samples, they have to wear the PPE. And those emergency medical technicians who would be called on the ambulance in response for somebody who is having difficulty breathing. They have to wear the PPE. When that individual arrives at our emergency room, the PPE is worn by the nurses and doctors in the emergency room. And if the individual is admitted to the isolation ward or the private ward at our JNF General Hospital, the PPE has to be worn by the nurses and doctors and the members on the health team who will be providing care on the ward. And so this is worn almost in every contact and interaction with the individual. And so every shift, when the nurses and doctors come on every shift, they have to be properly attired. And so if per se we have 5-10 patients on the COVID isolation ward, we can consume and utilize thousands of PPE within a short space of time. And so we would require as many as we can get. In terms of recycling, now, these items, they come with their own directions and recommendations from the manufacturers, and most of them are for one-time use, and so recycling is not advised.
Now, if anyone is listening to us now would like to make a contribution for a health worker in the context of PPEs, how can they do that?
Okay, so that's quite simple. You just make contact with the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Health, Dr. Dolores Stapleton Harris, or myself, or even the National Disaster Coordinator, who is chair of the COVID-19 task force. So it's pretty easy.
Are you taking donations as well online? I have some people in the diaspora who may want to help out. They can't leave home.
So that's fine. That's fine. That's possible also.
All right. So I would like to take a break now, Mr. Prime Minister. I'll give you a few moments, and Dr. Laws as well. We'll take a break. We've been going for about an hour. Give you a chance to take a break, and then we're going to come back. We're going to have the headline news now. We're going to come back for the second part of the program. And callers, I know you're a bit frustrated, but when we come back, we're going to go straight to the phone lines, unless the Prime Minister has an announcement to make.
We go to the phone. No, we go to the news.
We go to the news.
The FM Headline News is brought to you by Caribbean Alliance, KDP Enterprises, The Grange, Carib Brewery, CNC Trading.
Shipping your cargo shouldn't be a hassle. It can be as easy as a single call to Amerijet International, your worldwide cargo transportation solution. We provide all the services you need to ship your goods anywhere in the world. Whether your shipment is fresh, frozen, large or small, alive or hazardous, you can count on Amerijet to deliver it safe and sound. Amerijet International, by land, sea or air. We get it there. For more information, visit us online at www.amerijet.com or call us at KDP Enterprises, telephone number 466-9595.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
Did you know that the Grange Healthcare Facility is the first purpose-built non-governmental healthcare organization on St. Kitts, offering 24-hour nursing, therapeutic, and residential care for older adults? It's situated at Otley, 7 miles east of Vastair in beautifully landscaped surroundings. The Grange has a team of highly trained professionals and provides care that's rated as being comparable with UK and North American standards. The Grange offers varied accommodation to suit your individual needs, and our all-inclusive packages make the cost of care per hour the most competitive on the island. Services include convalescent care for all ages, daycare facilities for older adults, rehabilitation services, and training and continuing education for healthcare providers. For more information, call 466-5525 or 465-8020, fax 8221 or email thegrangehealth@gmail.com or visit our website at www.grangehealthcarefacility.com.
Without limits, happy and free. The skin you're in with no apology. The one to seize the day. Grab an LLB. Live, love, be. With LLB. Live, love, be. Live, love, be. Be who you know you can be. Grab an LLB. Live, love, be. Angostura, lemon, lime, and bitters. Live, love, be.
Protect your lifestyle with Caribbean Alliance Insurance. Dealing well with a low reputation and service for second to none. Securing you is our mission. People that you can trust, your business, property, we got you covered. Motor or personal, whatever it is, we got you covered. 130 years in this business, we've got you covered. For all your insurance needs, visit or call us at 465-2631 or 469-5303. Dealey Walwyn, people you can trust.
Monthly salaried government workers, pensioners, poverty alleviation stipend recipients will be paid on Monday, 20th April instead of Friday, 24th April, the government has announced, as a response to the hardships imposed by COVID-19's impact on the local economy.
Next week, there will be a gradual relaxation of restrictions and the zoning plan will be discontinued. 4 days will be made available for you if you must leave your home, but the shelter-in-place regulations will still be in force. This will allow you to better plan how to shop for food and other necessities. That is Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday will be available for shopping and other essential elements to be taken care of with a partial curfew in place. Wednesday will be a full 24-hour lockdown.
The payments are being made in a day that Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris declared will usher in new arrangements for partial curfews. In his recent address to the nation, the Prime Minister warned, though, that tougher measures could still be imposed if people did not follow the rules.
As we extend opportunities for persons to move with more partial curfews and less 24-hour lockdowns, we insist that social distancing and physical distancing must be practiced. B, no crowds will be allowed to loiter in any public space. C, there must be strict observance of the curfew.
The National Assembly Friday night approved a state of emergency for a further 6 months, effective Saturday, April 18, as St. Kitts and Nevis, with 14 confirmed cases of COVID-19, moved to contain the spread of a virus that has claimed more than 150,000 lives and infected more than 2 million people worldwide.
The question is that the resolution entitled Resolution of the National Assembly made under Section 19.3 of the St. Christopher and Nevis 1983 Constitution Order, as tabled and debated by this National Assembly and amended by replacing the word 12 in the penultimate paragraph and the final paragraph, is hereby approved by this National Assembly. Those in favor? Those against?
Speaker of the National Assembly, Mr. Michael Perkins.
So we'll call on the clerk to do the roll, please.
Honourable Member for St. Christopher 1, how do you desire to vote?
My name begins with I.
Honourable Member for St. Christopher 2, how do you desire to vote?
No!
Honourable Member for St. Christopher 3, how do you vote?
No.
Honourable Member for St. Christopher 4, how do you vote?
Aye.
Honourable Member for St. Christopher 5, how do you vote?
Aye.
Honourable Member for St. Christopher 7, as there is no St. Christopher 6. Honourable Member for St. Christopher 7, how do you vote? Honourable Member for Honourable Member for St. Christopher 8, how do you vote?
Aye.
Honourable Member for Nevis 9, how do you vote?
Aye.
Honourable Member for Nevis 10, how do you vote?
Aye.
Member for Nevis 11 is absent at this time. Honourable Senator Vincent Byron Jr., how do you vote?
Aye.
Honourable Senator Wendy Phipps, how do you vote?
Aye.
Honourable Senator Akila Byron Nisbet, how do you vote?
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, I wish to report to the House that there are 10 ayes and 2 noes.
The resolution was passed with a required 2/3 majority as the 10 parliamentarians on the government benches voted yes, while the 2 opposition parliamentarians present for the vote said no. Opposition Member of Parliament Patrice Nisbet debated the resolution but was absent for the count. Senator Nigel Carty was also absent. The seat for constituency number 6 was empty due to the OECS Supreme Court ruling that the former leader of the opposition, Dr. Denzel Douglas, had acknowledged allegiance to a foreign power by using a Commonwealth of Dominica diplomatic passport. Governor General Sir S.W. Tapley Seaton had earlier invited the opposition parliamentarians to agree on a new leader from among their ranks. That offer was rejected by the parliamentarians, who called instead for a by-election for the constituency number 6, a St. Kitts and Nevis Labour Party stronghold over the years. The resolution brought before the House Friday morning called for a state of emergency for a period of 12 months, but after prolonged debate was amended to a period of 6 months Friday night. The government's resolution to extend the state of emergency in the Federation's battle against the spread of COVID-19 attracted heated debate at Friday's emergency sitting of Parliament in Bastia.
And whereas the COVID-19 virus continues to pose a significant threat of a natural calamity and the scale of a public health emergency to the Federation of St. Christopher and Nevis, and it is therefore necessary to extend the state of emergency up to a period of 12 months or such short a period as may be specified. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the National Assembly that it is necessary to extend the state of emergency up to a period of 12 months or such short a period as may be specified to take effect on the 18th day of April 2020, that would be to combat the threat of the COVID-19 virus for the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. That is the resolution that is put before the House, Mr. Speaker, consistent with the Constitution.
Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris put the resolution before the National Assembly with a promise to make adjustments as necessary.
The Constitution provides for a period of 12 months or shorter, and that phraseology is embodied in the resolution. We do not know how long this pandemic will be with us. We are, of course, optimistic that the hard work that has been done so far, and we will continue to do, will help us to protect and keep the people of St. Kitts and Nevis safe. And so we are hoping that at the soonest possible interval, 6 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, we don't know. We have to go with the science. We will be able, as it were, to move to the new phase. And so, consistent with the Constitution, we have brought that resolution to the Parliament for support.
Junior Health Minister Wendy Phipps was the first parliamentarian on the government benches to support the resolution.
Our ability to compete regionally and internationally And the best way we do that is with our people, with our labor force, because it can't happen any other way. It won't happen with concrete, it won't happen with technology. It has to be driven by human potential and human productivity. I would call us, Mr. Speaker, to focus the mandate that we have in front of us on saving lives, on protecting our healthcare workers, and also slowing the spread of the infection. We need to move forward with the extension of these emergency powers for however long they might be within the mandate of the Constitution. And the debate today will guide us as to how long that period should be for the foreseeable future. As such, Mr. Speaker, I fully support the motion that we get constitutional cover and legislative cover in terms of the extension of the emergency powers, and that we approach everything we do going forward with common sense, with empathy, and with deep and enduring value for human life now and for the foreseeable future.
But opposition parliamentarian Congress Maynard questioned the rationale for the extension of a state of emergency.
From what I understand, the government is saying, according to them, that there is no community spread, although others may have a varying perspective. In fact, recently, I think the Prime Minister in his address spoke of the relaxation of some of the stringent measures that have been put in place to safeguard against the spread of the virus. So when our borders have remained closed, when the government has said that there is no community spread, when the Prime Minister has said that in coming days they will be looking at how to introduce other non-essential services, then how does it follow that we enter a parliament today to extend the state of emergency to possibly up to 12 months?
The representative for constituency number 3 also questioned the specifics of the state of emergency.
Now therefore be it hereby resolved by this National Assembly that it is necessary to extend the state of emergency up to a period of 12 months or such short a period as may be specified, they didn't say by who, to take effect from dash day of April 2020 to combat the threat of the COVID-19 virus to the Federation of St. Christopher and Nevis. So we're going to start on some day in April, which I should presume is tomorrow, and we don't know when it's going to end. We don't know when it's going to end. And that is why you have to take incremental steps. That is why you have to take incremental steps and say, we will do 3 weeks, we'll do 21 days. After that, we will do another 14 days. Or we're going to do 30 days. But 365 days?
The deputy political leader of the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party, Ms. Marcella Liebert, is claiming that the government is politicizing its response to COVID-19.
One of the other ways in which this pandemic has been totally mishandled is that there's been no involvement of the opposition. This is probably the only country in the world, no matter how much whole of society and so on, you hear them saying all the time, whole of society, just words. In truth and in fact, no involvement of the opposition. They have not, and we have offered and offered and offered, thank you, and still offering, because we believe Barbados sent to all the parties, all. Antigua sent to all the parties, all the political parties, all. Just like how you sent to all social groupings, all the political parties. But not here, because they're playing politics.
Speaking in the National Assembly on Friday during the debate on the resolution to extend the state of emergency that expires on Saturday, April 18th, Ms. Liebert accused the government of trying to fool the people.
You'd notice that in the resolution, it says emergency up to a period of 12 months. There's not up to in the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. There's not up to in the Constitution. The Constitution said 12 months or not up to 12 months. Not up to 12 months or. So it's specific. But it's a trick they're trying. It's a trick. But I want the people of the country to know, why is it that this government would want to have some discretion on the limitation of people's rights? Because when you have a state of emergency, that's what happens. You limit people's rights, their freedom of movement, and so on. Why you want to have 12 months of discretion on that? To manipulate people's freedom of movement and powers of arrest. Why you want that, Mr. Speaker?
Ms. Liebert also referenced what she described as set dates in the Constitution.
And, Mr. Speaker, there's some set dates in the Constitution. One would end on the 14th of May, come what may, no matter how much months they say they're giving themselves authority for. Come the 14th of May, the House must dissolve. Emergency and no emergency. And come the 11th of August, we must have those elections. We must have those elections. So all who want to stay in power after that, all who want to stay in power after that, the people of this country must know we don't want no despots running the country. Because people know that it's in times like these when governments have authority to restrict your rights that the despots show themselves.
Attorney General Vincent Byron described the opposition's expressed concerns as being without merit.
Let's be clear, Mr. Speaker, because let me get to the heart of what the problem is with this matter. This is the heart of it. I want, Mr. Speaker, to go to Section 5, subsection 5 of this Section 19. And he reads this, Mr. Speaker. A declaration of emergency may at any time be revoked by the Governor General by proclamation. By any time. Any time. Anything we do today can be revoked. So that next week, Friday, the Governor General can revoke this resolution, revoke it. It can be ended in a week, a month, 3 months, at any time. This state of emergency can be revoked. You don't know that? So what is she making this morning for?
He said the claims about the state of emergency missed an important point.
It is very clear. If anyone wants to read sections 45, 46, 47, and 48, Parliament must dissolve on May the 14th. It must. Mr. Speaker, I go further. Because they dance around and dance around and dance around. And up to now they ain't say it. The Constitution says that the Prime Minister has 90 days after that when he could call an election. And what is implied? The implied, not one of them said anything. But this is what all day this is about. It is implied that this government wants to extend the state of emergency for 12 months so that we don't have elections for 12 months. That's what they're trying to say. That's what this whole thing is about, And it's so ridiculous. That's what everything is about today. Mr. Speaker, it's about this government want to extend the elections for 12 months. And the French say so. God, I know it sounds ridiculous.
He asserted that a state of emergency had nothing to do with elections and challenged the opposition to suggest a timeline as an alternative to the government's proposal.
I've been disappointed, really disappointed today, because if the members opposite are government in waiting, if they are government in waiting, today's debate has failed miserably. Because they have not dealt with COVID-19, the threat to our people. Imagine there is an election, say in a month, 2 months, and they become the government. What are they going to do? suppose, God forbid, that it happen, what are they going to do? They're going to start from scratch? They're going to want to do everything all over again? What is going to happen? Are they going to mash it up? Are they going to mash it up? I don't understand this thing. This is serious business. This is Nancy's story.
Pan American Health Organization Director and the World Health Organization Regional Director for the Americas, Dr. Carissa Etienne, is warning the region to prepare for a full blast within the next few weeks. Dr. Etienne says they neither anticipated nor were they prepared for the magnitude of the current COVID-19 pandemic. She made the comments during a virtual press briefing on Wednesday on PAHO's response to the pandemic and the evolving situation of the virus in the Americas. Etienne added that the rate and magnitude of the transmission surprised PAHO, although it began looking at it late last year. Noting it was difficult to predict the magnitude of the COVID-19 pandemic, she added, "This pandemic has really surpassed all of the others we have had in terms of its magnitude." She said, and I quote, "I was also surprised by our inability to provide for the resources in terms of PPEs, masks, and tests, and the almost market failure concerning those required resources." End of quote. At the press briefing, which was streamed live from PAHO's headquarters in Washington, Etienne said COVID-19 was yet to hit with full force in the region, particularly in Latin America and the Caribbean, and PAHO expected it would intensify in the next few weeks. For GBN News, Beverly Tellersford.
On the day U.S. coronavirus deaths rose above 35,000, President Donald Trump let loose a cascade of incendiary messages on Twitter, taunting 4 Democratic governors and encouraging his supporters to flout stay-at-home orders designed to contain the deadly virus. In a series of all-caps tweets on Friday, Trump said, "Liberate Minnesota, liberate Michigan, liberate Virginia," and said the Second Amendment was under siege. Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut said the president was encouraging citizens to engage in armed rebellion. Meanwhile, protesters gathered outside the Minnesota governor's mansion on Friday to defy stay-at-home measures instituted by Governor Tim Walz. The demonstration was organized by anti-lockdown group Liberate Minnesota.
We're going to start writing summonses.
The day before, demonstrators in Virginia, many with young children, gathered outside the state capitol building in Richmond to protest Governor Ralph Northam's stay-at-home order. And earlier this week, thousands of Michigan residents blocked traffic and an entrance to a hospital in Lansing, the state capital. At a news conference on Friday, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer responded to the president's tweet.
You know, I hope that it's not encouraging more protests. I totally respect people's right to dissent and to voice their disagreement with decisions I've made. I'll tell you this. Every decision I've made has been centered around what's in the best interest of the public health of the people of Michigan. None of them has been easy. Every one of them's weighed heavily on me. But I've done what I thought the right thing to do is. I hope that if people are going to dissent, that they do so in a manner that doesn't compromise their safety or the safety of others.
After his Liberate tweets, Trump took aim at New York Governor Andrew Cuomo as he spoke at his daily news briefing. Trump said on Twitter, quote, "Governor Cuomo should spend more time doing and less time complaining. Get out there and get the job done. Stop talking. We built you thousands of hospital beds that you didn't need or use." A reporter at the news conference informed Cuomo of Trump's comments.
Wondering if you could respond to that.
The governor, whose state is the U.S. epicenter of the outbreak, did not mince words.
First of all, if he's sitting home watching TV, maybe he should get up and go to work, right? If he didn't really believe 2,500 beds was necessary, I don't believe the federal government would have helped build 2,500 beds. And the number came from a projection from him. That's why we built 2,500 beds at Javits. Because we listened to you, Mr. President. And if we were foolish for listening to you, then shame on us. But read your own report next time before you criticize it.
The extraordinary real-time exchange between Trump and Cuomo came after the president unveiled guidelines for a staggered three-stage process for states to lift restrictions on businesses and revive the U.S. economy. But many public health experts say that without wide-scale testing, which many governors say remains beyond reach due to failings of the Trump administration to ever launch such an effort, it is unlikely states will be able to safely reopen their businesses and end the lockdown.
That was the Win FM headline news, brought to you by KDP Enterprises, Caribbean Alliance, Carrie Brewery, CNC Trading, The Grange.
Protect your lifestyle with Caribbean Alliance Insurance. Till you walk with a low reputation and service for second to none. Securing you is our mission. People that you can trust, your business, property, we got you covered. Motor or personal, whatever it is, we got you covered. 130 years in this business, we've got you covered. For all your insurance needs, visit or call us at 465-2631 or 469-5303. Dealey Walwyn, people you can trust.
Without limits, happy and free. The skin you're in with no apology. The one to seize the day. Grab an LLB. Live, love, be. With LLB. Live, love, be. Live, love, be. Be who you know you can be. Grab an LLB. Live, love, be. Angostura, lemon, lime, and bitters. Live, love, be.
Did you know that the Grange Healthcare Facility is the first purpose-built non-governmental healthcare organization on St. Kitts, offering 24-hour nursing, therapeutic, and residential care for older adults? It's situated at Otley, 7 miles east of Vastair in beautifully landscaped surroundings. The Grange has a team of highly trained professionals and provides care that's rated as being comparable with UK and North American standards. The Grange offers varied accommodation to suit your individual needs, and our all-inclusive packages make the cost of care per hour the most competitive on the island. Services include convalescent care for all ages, daycare facilities for older adults, rehabilitation services, and training and continuing education for healthcare providers. For more information, call 466-5525 or 465-8020, fax 466-8221, or email thegrangehealth@gmail.com, or visit our website at www.grangehealthcarefacility.com.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
Shipping your cargo shouldn't be a hassle. It can be as easy as a single call to Amerijet International, your worldwide cargo transportation solution. We provide all the services you need to ship your goods anywhere in the world. Whether your shipment is fresh, frozen, large or small, alive or hazardous, you can count on Amerijet to deliver it safe and sound. Amerijet International, by land, sea or air. We get it there. For more information, visit us online at www.amerijet.com or call us at KDP Enterprises, telephone number 466-9595.
Well, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for being a part of our program today. The Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. Timothy Harris, and the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Hazel Laws, will continue in just a moment. Let's say good afternoon to the Cable.
As social distancing becomes the norm of our everyday life, the Cable wants you, our customer, to know that we are here for you every day. Just log in to us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Send us your feedback at email customerservice@thecable.biz. Visit our website www.thecable.net. It's also nice to know you can pay your bills at a distance, online at all commercial banks or at www.thecable.net/pay. Now's the time to try online banking. It's ultra easy. Call us at 465-2588, 662-7742, or 763-0184. The Cable. We're here for you.
Well, good afternoon to you once again. We'll take your calls in just a moment. We just have to hear now from the Prime Minister. He's going to make a brief announcement, and then we're going to hear from you. So do stand by. We'll take your calls in a moment. Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you. Very quickly, I am aware that on Monday, the Social Security Board will begin the first batch of payments with respect to self-employed persons and those workers, that is, employees, who would have lost income as a result of the COVID-19. These employees principally would be persons engaged in the tourism and hospitality service. The self-employed category, of course, is a wide group. It would include the braiders, the taximen, and other persons who are involved in self-employment. Again, Monday, the Social Security Board has advised it will begin the first payment. So some persons will be processed for Monday, and I gather and expect that every day thereafter, to the extent the necessaries are fulfilled, that persons will be paid. So Monday, the first batch of self-employed persons and employees who would have lost income as a result of the COVID-19 will be in receipt of the $1,000 commitment from Social Security. Of course, bearing in mind that that $1,000 may be adjusted if the person is not fully out of work, that is on reduced days, and is earning, for example, $200 per month, he will get a top-up of $800, so that his minimum earnings would be $1,000. The self-employed person, they know who they are. Those are being processed starting on Monday. The government, in order to assist with and to allow persons to benefit from the easement in the regulations, has determined that the government auxiliary employees will be paid on Thursday, the 23rd of April. So all so-called non-establishment workers will be paid on Thursday, the 23rd of April. That is because Thursday and Friday are the 2 additional days next week that are reserved for persons to go about their normal business, of course always abiding by the regulations which call for the wearing of masks, for example, the observance of the 6 feet distancing. So those persons will be facilitated with early payment. I gather in terms of the government as a whole, arrangements are also being made, and arrangements are being made for early payment. The Accountant General should have and will make the necessary announcement. I should say too, for the farmers and fishers, that the government has listened. We have heard the advice, particularly regionally and at the level of the FAO, that in small countries and from our own knowledge, farmers tend to be engaged a limited number of support personnel, and therefore the social distancing can be easily effected. And therefore in these regulations, number 14 of 20, and I hope the Fisheries Department and the Agriculture Department have these on their apps and on their website, provision has been made for farmers and so on to get a bit more time to be able to become involved in the food support. So that is some good news with respect to the farming community. Equally, there is some good news with respect to those who are involved in construction, in that on the days of limited business operations, provision has been made in Regulation 16, subsection 9, for persons, and I'll read this section, during a day of limited operation. And those days are Monday next week, Tuesday next week, Thursday next week, and Friday next week. Works of construction, farmers and fishers may operate and shall adhere to social distancing and physical distancing protocols pursuant to Regulation 7. We go to Regulation 7, and it sets out the requirements with respect to social and physical distancing. In other words, the 6 feet provision, etc., etc. So once every health precaution is being taken, there is a facilitation for those who are involved in construction, which means then we are seeing an easement. More persons will be able to get out in the world of work, earn some income, but we must do so in a measured way. The public transportation, again, there's been every effort to assist the bus operators. There will be increase in the number of passengers that they can carry, but of course that is under Regulation 16.8. Before we had 1 passenger per row. Now there shall be no more than 2 passengers per row. So it means they can go from about 4 or 5 to about 8. The bus would normally take between 14 and 15. So they are in a better position financially. However, all this is contingent, and the bus operators observing not just the social distancing, the staggered approach to the seating of passengers. The masks will have to be worn, and they will also have to have sanitizers and ensure that they clean the seats, the doorknobs, and all other places, surfaces of the buses to minimize this transmission. So we are attempting to help as many persons as possible, but we want people to exercise caution because we are not yet out of the woods. There is also some respite, if you will, given with respect to weddings. And I know before this batch of regulations, several weddings had to be postponed. I hope that the love still abounds, and they can now take advantage of that opportunity in a restricted way. We don't, and we are not accommodating large weddings. So Regulation 16 at subsection 7 says, notwithstanding Regulation 10, which says no wedding, during a day of limited operation, that is, you could marry Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, a person may attend a wedding, but no more than 10 persons should be in attendance, no more than 10. So choose your friends and family who are very special, who must be there to be there. We keep it down to a minimum. The 10 person, in addition to the 10, 1 officiant should be in attendance, that may be the pastor. Essential camera technicians could be in attendance, and only 2 essential witnesses should be in attendance. The normal thing of having somebody, as it were, to sign the books and whatever else needed to be signed. Those persons are given some protection by the legislation, and all persons except the bride and groom shall adhere to social distancing and physical distancing protocols subject to Regulation 7. So those are some new developments, some of the easement, the relaxation of the restrictions, again contingent, and persons abiding with all the other provisions of the regulations. I can say also, with respect to the farmers and fishers, I have spoken with the Director of Fisheries, Mr. Mark Williams. He should establish the protocols by which fishing in particular will take place. So this he is specifically responsible for the fishing subsector. With respect to the other sector of agriculture, and agriculture generally by FAO is defined to include forestry, fisheries, and crop and livestock. With respect to livestock, the Department of Agriculture will continue to provide free Bacchus to you. This is a wonderful opportunity. Bacchus is a very, very expensive product, but it's critical to maintain the good health of our livestock. With the easement, the Agriculture Department will be charged with offering land preparation services as part of our new trust in food security, and the land preparation services will be made available for an initial period freely. I hope Mr. Melvin James and his staff are well prepared to advise how these services will be offered around the country within the 4 working days which are available in a manner of speaking. In addition, Mr. Melvin James should have organized for the payment of certain grants, particularly to the livestock farmers who would have suffered greatly last year. I want to remind the farmers that we have waived water payments for a particular period of time. Those have been stipulated in the stimulus. So we are seeing now a gradual build-out of the stimulus package affecting all sectors. And I thought that with respect to the accommodations, the adjustment in the payments as they come to me, I should share in this program. The good news, your Social Security $1,000 payment, that's a threshold amount, that begins on Monday. Doesn't mean that everyone will get on Monday, because the necessaries in relation to processing have to be completed. And that relates to both self-employed and employees. And as I said, the government auxiliary employees, they will be paid early. And of course, the STEP and other workers will be paid early in the coming weeks. So we are doing all that we can to make life easier for our people.
And thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. We now take calls from our listeners. Our numbers are 4660989, 6620989, 7620989. Our overseas numbers 718-285-6984, 305-921-4619, 0333-344-0065. And those numbers are on our website, www.winnfm.com. We go to the phone lines. Caller, you're live and on the air. Thanks for waiting. Hello, caller. All right, let's go back to the phone lines, caller. All right, so we seem to be missing a few callers here. Let's try again. Caller, good afternoon. You're live.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mr. Bacchus.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. You're live and on the air. Go ahead, please.
I know that, Mr. Bacchus. And good afternoon to the Honorable Prime Minister.
Good afternoon, sir.
Oh, Mr. Hardis.
Good afternoon to
yes.
Dr. Laws.
Good afternoon, sir.
My name is Claudius Hardis Gums from SP, where the best be, Mr. Prime Minister. So, Mr. Bacchus, I want to say, and I want to thank God that we have a team unity government in power. Because, Mr. Bacchus, God forbid, if we had the opposition party in power, it would have been chaos and mayhem in the country. You know why, Mr. Bacchus? Because imagine the opposition under the leadership of Denzel Douglas take us to the IMF, give us haircut. People invested in treasury bonds, invested in other things in the treasury, had to get haircut, lose a lot of money. So if he was in power, God forbid, you know what had happened in this country? There have been plenty problems, Mr. Bacchus, plenty problems. So I want to thank God for team unity. Thank God for the Prime Minister. Now, Mr. Bacchus, we have opposition in this country. Once they're not in charge, the aim is to mash up and destroy the same country that they want to rule. Same country they want to rule. cannot have none of this. We are saying that the opposition needs to be a part of the conversation. Come and help, make the contribution. They are doing nothing. Yesterday in Parliament, I was so disappointed with the opposition. Imagine my friend, the Honorable Marcel Liebert, coming in talking about all kind of passa. Let us deal with the issue. We have a serious issue at hand. The virus come to destroy the world. Yeah, and a friend. Anybody in its pathway is going to destroy. Let us talk about that. Give your contribution, right? Give your ideas as to how we could help to destroy this virus. Don't come in and passa. I left that for later on when the bell ring and you get the blows again. We'll deal with that. But for now, let us deal with the pandemic. Let us deal with the virus.
All right, thank you very much. Let's deal with the virus. Let's go back to the phone lines and take another call. Call you live and on the air. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon. Thanks for holding. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, to the Prime Minister, I want to thank you, and I want to say the whole election issue, I think, really should be put to one side for now. I mean, in St. Kitts and Nevis, it's a tradition for campaigning to happen and, groups to come out and public campaigning and public meetings and stuff. And one could not even imagine something like that happening at a time like this. And how would you practice social distancing under these type of conditions? But it brings me to my question. What I wanted to ask really is about the food delivery services in St. Kitts and Nevis and the supermarkets. And are they allowed to operate both inside and outside of the restrictions? And because I think it really helps to ease the pressure on the supermarkets and also ease the amount of people that comes into town or goes out to get groceries if they can get those items from home. And I know the online shopping is a whole new concept. People are getting accustomed to it. But I'm also seeing where we have a lot of customers who are complaining because we're not able to deliver within the allotted time, and we're having to refund, we're having to apologize. It's a very critical thing, but people do appreciate the service. But given the time constraints, can you say definitively if food delivery couriers and supermarkets can operate outside of these hours, even if not necessarily to the public, but for the purpose of online ordering fulfillment? And my next question is to the CMO, and I wanted to find out from her if she is aware of drug trials in the United States from Gilead Sciences, their drug remdesivir, if I'm pronouncing it properly, which has had some successes in Chicago on trials, and where they've seen symptoms of fever and other COVID-19 symptoms being suppressed within a week and patients being discharged. I just wanted to know if the CMO is aware of this and has any comments. I know it's early days for this trial, but I just wanted to know. And Prime Minister, can I have a definitive answer on the food delivery issue? Thank you.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you for your call. Our numbers are 4660989. We're going to go back to the phone lines. Try and get as many callers in before we go to the Prime Minister. Call you on the air. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, caller. You're live and on the air.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bacchus.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon to you.
Yes, notwithstanding what the CMO said about testing, it seems to be the consensus, certainly in larger countries, that even more widespread testing is required before they can return to any semblance of normalcy. Is that also true in smaller countries like ours? And are they making preparations for that? To the Prime Minister, are you still the CARICOM point Prime Minister on health matters at this time, or have you deferred to the current chairman, Barbados' Prime Minister Motley? And finally, what does victory look like? What does it look like medically speaking and economically speaking? Because this is not just an inconvenience. Yes, we are fighting the virus to preserve life, but we are also in a battle to preserve livelihoods for people who are losing their jobs, okay, and not just in the tourism sector either. And it is in this context that people are asking the wisdom in extending the state of emergency for as long as even 6 months. For that is a signal to the local and foreign businesses that we don't expect a return to some semblance of normalcy anytime soon. Isn't that contradictory to the stated goal of wanting to be the first country in the region to be back to normal, so to speak? And wasn't a month-to-month extension not the preferred way to go? Because you see, overreaction can be just as harmful as procrastination. Meaning, if we had closed our borders early, we would not have been in this predicament. Okay? And so...
Thank you very much, caller. We're going to go on to the next caller. Call you live and on the air. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bacchus.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon.
And good afternoon to the Honorable Dr. Timothy Harris. And good afternoon to the CMO,
Good
Mrs. Lodge.
afternoon, Rasael.
Blessed love and honor. I just like to get a confirmation here within what this regulation now you all implement in a new sitting that was just outlined in the last debate yesterday in Parliament. Because I see that you all said that plane can be fly out and ship can be out. But you have indication of these ship and plane are part of the gesture towards of the stabilization of how we are seeing people flocking in. So even though if these ship and plane, let me look for instance, the medical people who are part of WAS and Windsor, I heard that America is indicating of their students to be returning home. But shouldn't that just to be opened up wholly up than how we know we are on a lockdown stage? And if this is the measure that you all are implying with these regulations, that means you all are only protecting the interest of the foreign powers and not the interest of our people's safety. That's a question I would like to put forward. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. First of all, let me apologize to the callers. I've had to cut a few calls because of the interest of time, and I do apologize for that. We're trying to get you to just make your point within a minute, so I do beg your pardon. Let's go now back to the panelists. We go to the Prime Minister and the CMO for some responses, and then we'll take the other batch of callers in just a moment. So, Mr. Prime Minister.
Thanks. I would want to say the regulations SRNO number 14 of 2020 at Regulation 11 imposes a restriction for the purposes of preventing, controlling, and suppressing the spread of the novel coronavirus or COVID-19 with immediate effect, and there are exceptions that, for example, with the approval of the airport authorities, etc., etc., and the visitors shall not be permitted to enter and disembark for any reason at all. Of course, we have to be aware that we are under international obligations, and there will be situations from time to time where it may become necessary for persons to move, and we are obliged under the international regulations to provide that support. But Ross went to the specific case where students from Windsor or whichever university, were facilitated on their way out of the country. Again, this is the right thing to do, because getting people where they are at is almost an imperative now of the international community, to the extent that it can happen without doing any danger. And that is why, while we allowed the aircraft to come in, it was clear that there could be no disembarking of anyone. In other words, they could not bring persons in to come into St. Kitts, because recall that the decision which we took very early, contrary to what Ira McMahon is saying, we took it very early, and the CMO went through that. We were among the first set of countries to have imposed border restrictions and travel advisories. That was to prevent the influx of people, because that increased the risk of persons who may have been exposed to the virus. I'll use a word, contaminating, but really, in other words, transmitting the virus to others. So the outward movement is not problematic for us. It is the other way, people coming in, and we have a lockdown on that. And in the case of the persons involved at Ross University, that was a decision which their university and their government undertook at all costs to themselves. And we were, it was in our interest and in the interest of building long-term relationship that you do not hold the citizens of another country against their will. And so we facilitated them. It cost us nothing in money terms, but built tremendous goodwill, because those students would remember at their darkest hour, the country facilitated them. With respect to the matter of closing the border at the appropriate time, again, Ira McMahon is just being his usual political self, and this is not the time for it, really. The matter of the extending of the curfew or the emergency powers, whether that scares investors, no, it does not, because it is the reality all over the world. It is the reality in Antigua. It's the reality in the British Virgin Islands. In London, we hear just 2 days ago they have shut down for another 3 weeks. Every sensible investor knows that the climate now everywhere in large and small countries is unstable. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows that the powers of enforcement requires, as it were, the use of emergency powers. So that is why Jamaica is doing it. That is why Trinidad is doing it. That is why Barbados has done it. I don't know any country that has not done it. And so, since it is so normal everywhere, it becomes a non-issue in terms of selection. In other words, the investor would find it highly irresponsible if a jurisdiction does not apply those resources, because it will send the wrong message that you are not concerned, you are not careful, you are not intending to protect people, and that they will not want to come. So we have to do these things. The most powerful country has had to do this in the most dramatic of ways. With limited notice, I've stopped every plane from coming in from Europe, except the UK, and within a week, the UK was added to the list. So when something like this is happening everywhere, it sets a standard, it levels the field in relation to that. Now look what is happening locally. From next week, we are doing easement. So that is sending the right signal that the country is open up, but not a free for all. So we have set new regulations for our people to participate in the new world order, if you will, of masks, of gloves, of social distancing. So we are ahead of most persons. The CMO, if persons listen carefully, said, I didn't just get up one night, had a dream, and went to the cabinet, a responsible cabinet of experienced functionaries, and said to them, let us open up. I had my advice and my knowledge. I look at the expertise and experience provided and guidance by the World Health Organization. That is the authority now, and PAHO and CARFO, and they outlined the 6 criteria. And she made, and her team made the assessment and said, we are at this spot. They were able to look not only at those criteria, but where we are at. And the truth is, we have not seen a spike of any magnitude in the number of cases day by day. And so their advice is that we are at a place, yes, things can get worse and will get worse perhaps before they get better, but they are within the capacity of the health system to deliver. They are within the capacity now. When this thing first came into vogue in December in China, until when it was declared a pandemic, the health system that we inherited was not yet ready. Under this administration, as a result of initiatives taken before and now, we are now at a better spot. When we inherited the health sector, Mary Charles was out of it. It was allowed to go in deterioration. The roof fell in, and immediately As an emergency act, we had to build a brand new hospital. That brand new hospital is now in service, providing additional support health services such as dental health care, and it is very well used in that particular aspect. In the event the JNF gets crowded, God forbid that happens, then you have Mary Charles that we use. So we are at a better place in terms of health care to be able to respond. I think those were the questions that I posed that were of interest to me. Of being the chairman of CARICOM lead in relation to health, yes it is, but CARICOM has always acted within a dual structure. The chair of CARICOM is the overall chair, and you have lead persons for health, for sports, for whatever. There is absolute dialogue. Before the meeting took place this week with respect to health, Mayor Motley contacted me. We discussed it. I was in touch with the CARICOM Secretariat, the Assistant Secretary General with respect to health matters. We discussed the agenda. I communicate to Mayor my approval for the actions to be taken and support. We had in place our representatives here who would participate. The Prime Minister, of course, at this time of pandemic and Parliament coming, was not available to participate in that regional meeting. But I was well briefed by the Minister who participated in our behalf. And again, we have to avoid getting ourselves locked into small things. Small things, whether the Prime Minister is at a meeting. Well, let me say this. I prefer to be at every meeting dealing with the matters relating to St. Kitts and Nevis at this time in preference to any other meeting. And I will ensure, however, that the country is represented by qualified individuals. At every meeting where St. Kitts and Nevis is to be represented, we ensure that the relevant persons at the highest level will be there. But it will not be necessary always. And I've been around for a long time as Foreign Minister and as Prime Minister. So I know what it is, particularly in this cycle, the very cycle in which they are attempting to force me to go. No Prime Minister will get himself locked down. Even when I was chairman, I took on special responsibility for Venezuela. Other persons were not available. They asked me to continue because they were in election cycle and other things. So let's not try to dramatize about the role. There is no void. I am aware, I am seized, I give my input, I get communication from the relevant authorities, and I rely on the Ministry of Health to provide the advice and to ably represent the country position. So that is where that is at. I have been in meeting with respect to the IMF. I've been in meeting with the ECCB. I've been in meeting with the OECS. So we have been involved, we have been engaged, and I personally have been. But we have a crisis. St. Kitts and Nevis comes first. And yes, we are in solidarity with all the other member states. It is not necessary that every of the meeting call that I should be present with them. Indeed, every meeting call in St. Kitts and Nevis, I don't have to be there, but I expect to be informed and to be advised. So it is a moment of crisis, and the Prime Minister's focus 24/7 is on the situation in St. Kitts and Nevis, within the OECS and within CARICOM. Please let us not make a mountaintop over a molehill. Non-issues. Then the election issue, put to rest, social distance, the food delivery. I think the caller before, I want to thank him for an important contribution. As he said, this is not the time for us to be engaged in the partisan politics. It's for us to deal with the pandemic. And that is what I am focused on, primarily on St. Kitts and Nevis, and of course within the region and further afield. I've been engaged just the past week in intensive discussions with persons in the Situation Room and the White House. They have called me, the U.S. ambassador has engaged me, and we have had days of back-to-back discussion. I've had to get the CMO and her team to become involved, provide support, etc. So the Prime Minister knows what to do. I'm an experienced hand at determining what meeting I need to engage myself. And I have confidence in the team of ministers to be able to lend support. The more important question is the delivery, and I want to thank the caller to raise this. We have a limited number of wholesalers, and we want to ensure that they are responsive. They have had their limits because of the constraint and the 2 days, and by and large, in a manner of speaking, they prioritize, by necessity, their own retail outlet. We have now eased up that and given 4 days. We have also had discussion with the president of the chamber about ways in which the wholesalers can be more efficient, better organized to get the foods to the rural and other shops. And we have an agreement and an understanding. If there is a need for a special dispensation for them to get their goods to the outer communities, that can be facilitated by the Commissioner of Police. I think there is no difficulty, but I want to encourage Rams and David Cawadro and Ocean Cold Storage to be better at delivery to the shops in the country and to take cognizance of the call and the request of the caller. I want to encourage the larger supermarkets, the Value Marts, the Rams, the Best Buy. It is full time to get on board with the online shopping. And whatever concessions we can give as a government to facilitate that in terms of duty-free, we are willing to consider an organized response.
Dr. Loss?
Yes. The caller also spoke about the delivery of food via courier. And I think the understanding from the members of the COVID-19 task force is that the delivery of food via courier should really be on the limited days of operation. For example, next week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Another question of interest to me, are we aware of the drug trial conducted by Gilead involving remdesivir? And yes, the Ministry of Health is aware of this drug trial to the point whereby the Ministry of Health is in the process of trying to procure remdesivir in terms of our ordering same, such that when the outbreak advances and we do have persons admitted and are seriously ill, that we can also utilize this drug. And we are not only aware of this drug trial, we are aware of other trials involving drugs like hydroxychloroquine, chloroquine, anti-HIV medication, IV vitamin C, and even the utilization of interferon. And so the Ministry of Health has been proactive in procuring some of these drugs such that we can have medication to offer individuals who would become COVID-19 positive and maybe experiencing the severe form of this disease. And so, yes, the Ministry of Health is following up all the latest drug trials in terms of those medications that are proven successful in the treatment of COVID-19. Another caller, he asked about testing and if we are making arrangements for more widespread testing. Well, I'll begin by answering and saying that the Ministry of Health at this time the Federation has one of the highest rates of testing per capita in the Caribbean. Let us look at the data. This is coming out of Pan American Health Organization Situation Report dated Thursday, April 16th. Barbados to date, up to then, conducted 864 tests. Let's remember their population is much larger than ours. Dominica, 324 tests. St. Lucia, 306 tests, followed by St. Kitts and Nevis, To date, we've conducted 247 tests to date. And yes, we are making arrangements to increase this even further. There is some limitations, and these limitations are not only experienced by ourselves, but even our neighboring islands and everybody across the globe, because there is a lag in terms of the availability of reagents and test kits to conduct tests. And so that's the limitation that we are experiencing, and also the availability of viral transport media. But we have good news. We just got some supplies of viral transport media earlier this week. And so, yes, in terms of testing, we will continue our mobile service. And so, yes, we have a vehicle that goes around from site to site, collecting samples for us to send off to CARFA and to Next Generation Lab. And we also erected a tent at the back of the hospital. And the plan is to have a drive-through site where individuals can drive through and have their samples collected. And so these are just some of the plans that we have in place in terms of increasing further our testing. But I just want to underscore that all the suspected cases to date have been sampled, and their samples have been sent off to the 2 labs.
And Dr. Laws, can you give us an update on antibody testing in the context of what I think you call herd immunity, to the extent of the degree of herd immunity that may exist? Can you explain it to us, please?
Okay, so antibody testing. And so, yes, there is a rising number of antibody test kits that are available on the market internationally, but a number of them, they are not approved and accredited as yet. And because of that, they are causing chaos, actually, in some populations, whereby you have a number of individuals being given false positive test results and false negative test results. And as a matter of fact, on Thursday, the Ministry of Health participated in a meeting with the experts and advisors at the Pan American Health Organization's office in Barbados. And we were told emphatically that at this time, the World Health Organization and the Pan American Health Organization, they are not recommending the use of antibody test kits for the diagnosis of COVID-19. We were reminded that the gold standard in terms of the diagnosis of COVID-19 is the RT-PCR test, RT-PCR antigen test. And so that's why for us, we are utilizing the Next Generation Lab that provides this methodology of testing, and the Caribbean Public Health Agency Lab that provides that also. Later on, what they're saying to us is that we can utilize the antibody testing for research purposes, and eventually for us to find out or determine the prevalence of antibodies and immunity in our population. I went on even in that same meeting to talk about herd immunity with the experts, and Dr. Gabriel said to me that there's still a lot of unknowns. We do not know how long, when somebody develops immunity to COVID-19, we do not know how long this immunity would last. Would it be a few months? Would it be 1 year? Or a few years? So for now, that is still an unknown to be determined. And then also they do not know the cut point. In other words, under normal circumstances, in order for a territory to deem having herd immunity, you would have to have 50 to 90% of the population having or showing the prevalence of antibodies and immunity. And again, for COVID-19, we do not know what is the percentage cut point for the determination of herd immunity. And so there are some unknowns. And so that's why we cannot say no. How long it's going to take us to get through the curve in terms of the rise and fall in the number of cases, because Again, it's going to be determined by the rate at which the Federation develops herd immunity. Yes, and so we do not know if it's a 1 week. It cannot be 1 week. It's going to take a while in order for us to develop herd immunity such that when we would have opened our borders and persons come into the country, you do not see a second or a third spike in the number of cases. And so it's going to be a while. This whole process is going to take us a while, because it's either the development of herd immunity or the introduction of a vaccine or the confirmation of specific pharmaceutical agents that can be given to those that are critically ill to prevent the complications and death. Yeah? And so we still have a way to go in terms of solving the issues and overcoming this pandemic.
Would you also like to make a distinction between having a vaccine for, let's say, high-risk groups rather than a universal vaccine? Is that something you could speak to?
Well, Mr. Bacchus, you develop a vaccine if you develop a vaccine. All right. So the first, the University of the Oxford University trial seems to be the furthest on in terms of the 70 vaccine candidates on the market, and so each candidate would have to go through the set number of randomized controlled trials in order for them to prove that it is safe to be used in humans and that there are no adverse effects, etc. And so once this is done, it would be available for everybody and not just those that are high risk. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to give or inject a vaccine into somebody and then the adverse effects outweigh the positives.
Thank you very much. Two questions to the Prime Minister. Mr. Prime Minister, with the state of emergency extending to September, are you concerned, if it does get there, of any impact in the offshore industry in the context of students from Ross University otherwise? Second question, is the Prime Minister prepared to divulge how much is in the surplus reserve, so to calm nerves, as seeing that the country is going through a bit of upheaval in the context of economic upheaval, not the other kind that we, of course, never ever expect or want. Mr. Prime Minister.
Could you repeat the questions? I didn't get to.
All right. The first question is, with the state of emergency extending to the period of September, is the Prime Minister concerned that could have an impact on the offshore university of Ross University and so on? And the second part of the question is the Prime Minister prepared to divulge how much is in the surplus reserve of the government at this time when people are concerned about economic shocks?
Thank you very much for those questions. What I would say, no, I have no inhibitions, no concern that the existence of the state of emergency will impact upon appropriate decisions. Again, state of emergency is a lived reality in almost every jurisdiction. And wherever they are operating to protect people from COVID. Any sensible university professional making a decision about students' placement would want to make sure that the country has an arsenal of responses to deal with COVID-19. One such will be the existence, for example, of PPE, personal protective equipment, the capacity of the hospital in case something were to happen to a foreign student. All those are going to rank higher than the issue of the emergency, because all the emergency powers are intended to do in the main is to keep persons in shelter unless there is a compelling reason. The students, their parents, their university would love that, would love to know that there is some element of discipline that would minimize the exposure of their students to the transmission of the virus or even in the transmission of it to others. That is one of the reasons too, while foreign nationals from sophisticated economies and where they believe they have more sophisticated health systems want to go back even in time of challenge, because they presuppose that if the worst were to happen, they have a better chance. Again, I think we are making too much of the state of emergency. It is a norm. It is one of the tools which we heard the CMO said that is required to enforce what the World Health Organization have said is required. The social distancing, the physical distancing. We now add to the list the wearing of masks. And if all things were to happen, we need the appropriate legal framework with the regime to implement them quickly and rapidly. And so the state of emergency is an asset. And maybe we should spend some time, because you see, whatever we are able to do now, and Claudius Gums made that rich point, we are able to do by relying on our own resources, which is the surpluses that we accumulated over the years by prudent fiscal management. So when countries in the Caribbean are talking about cutting back on their employee base if they are to sustain it through the difficulties, we have not had one concern about it. But that would depend, of course, on how long this situation were to go. Because just as most of the entities will say, we are getting reduced income now, so to the government. You have heard the government said we reduced the corporation tax from 33% to 25%, a significant reduction of over 25% in the tax rate during this trying period. You have heard us say that we slashed the taxes for unincorporated business by 50%. These are significant and dramatic and the best in the region. I heard the Minister of Finance in Trinidad and Tobago say, we will not waiver one tax, we will not waive them. And he put the important question, how do you expect the government of Trinidad and Tobago to waive taxes when it's the very taxes we need to be able to assist those who are now going on the dole, those who are now becoming unemployed, when we need those taxes to buy the personal protective equipment for the frontline workers. So that is a reality facing most countries. But yes, we have managed well over the last 5 years. We have had positive growth over the last 5 years. Unlike the period immediately before our time, 2010 to 2015. We have not resorted over the last 5 years to any increases in taxes. But between 2010 and 2015, electricity went up 85%, water bills went up 600%, increment was stopped, non-establishment bonus honorarium paid in the end of the year amounting to about 2.5% of wages, all those were stopped. And it was not in the case of a pandemic. So Claudius Gums, you are so very right and perfectly right to say thank God for team unity. Because here it is. Before 2015, we were not having conversations about surpluses and reserve. The conversation were about the fact that we chalk up the most disgraceful debt ratio in the world. That equivalent to a failed state, 199%. It was that for the first time in the history of a government, we had to go to the IMF and we borrowed $225 million to be able to buy toilet paper for JNF Hospital, to be able to pay the salaries. That was how bad things were. So I'm happy that in the short period of 5 years, we are having a conversation about surpluses. The good thing about surpluses, they have to be preserved for the rainy day. And we all never know the intensity of the rains. And that is one of the things why we have to manage what appear to be surpluses. Look at it. In the context of the pandemic, we have had to come with over $120 million and counting to respond to it. And not 1 cent of that has come from the bank. But I would say, I don't walk with the figures at me, but that information certainly is in the public accounts that are laid before the Parliament. So that information is there. And the extending, we dealt with the issue of the impact. But I want to go to a greater picture. Because you see, I keep saying, and the point may have missed some people in the context, and it was a learning I've got from West Nettleford, Professor. All we have is us. Our first response must be us. Right now, the most powerful country in the world, the United States of America, cannot help us with 1 ventilator. All we have is us. That most powerful country had conversation with me at Prime Minister with the Situation Room in the White House. And it was a conversation of how our government could facilitate Harris Over Limited to be able to go out to work and to produce parts that are critical for them to get ventilators going in the USA and in the rest of the world. That is a significant development. They are looking to us to supply input for them to get ventilators, not to offer us what? The geopolitics of that has changed in a very significant way. St. Kitts and Nevis now takes on international importance in the context of that. And so, part of the negotiation we will have, well, what does that mean for Harrissover, that a couple weeks before this thing had struck, we were told that half of the plant may have to close. And they have said to us, well, that, of course, is going to be considered positively for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. You understand what is happening? Our response then has to be in proper management. And thank God we have the results to show. Moving forward, that is why I'm not as pessimistic as others. One, when we put forward the 2020 budget, I put in that $191 million for capital expenditure to complete the Island Main Road, to complete the project in Old Road to prevent the shut-off should we have another, God forbid, hurricane of any magnitude, to develop the fisheries project in Old Road to assist the fisher folks earn a living, to be able to do many other things across the country. And we see how we are doing with the Island Main Road project, putting jobs, putting people there. Our housing project, we announced $30 million for mortgage financing. As we get into the period of easement with good results week by week, we now are easing up for construction. It means that those kind of activities are going to spur demand for hardware services, so those are now going to be opened. By and large, that is what they are depending upon. And we have a plan to work it. Will it be perfect? No, it will not be. Well, what about the tourism? A major plank. Will you tell me what you think will happen in tourism? For a while, nobody will travel. So what is the anxiety in terms of saying that a curfew will prevent that, even if there was no curfew? Until there is assurance across country that COVID-19 is under control, island by island, country by country, we might as well forget travel for a while. That is just a lived reality now. And whether or not we were in an emergency, that ain't going to change that. We all know that this period is the weakest period in terms of stay-over arrival in St. Kitts and Nevis anyway. We have to first see American Airlines back in the air again, and BA, from those critical countries which provides the bulk of our tourist arrivals, for us to really begin, as it were, to say that there are going to be substantial activity. My own understanding, and that is why all we have really It's time to plan and to prepare for certain eventualities. And the CMO keeps saying, we just really don't know, but we need time. And what we have to do is to use the time wisely. So while we have this setback in tourism, which is not unique to us, nobody now going to go on any cruise anywhere. Nobody. That's just a health reality, because people have come to see and realize of all the modes of travel, perhaps the cruise have come into sharper focus for the extreme vulnerability of it. And so that is a matter that we will have to deal with. We are looking to manufacture it. We have seen now the potential for Harrissover to at least maintain for a couple more months its workers. And that is happening, notwithstanding an emergency in place. In fact, it was the existence of the emergency in large measure that led to them to call to say, what can you do? How can you help? We have seen a new line of product at Sun Island. Take hope in this. We are seeing the potential for online movement of goods and services to take place. And all these are going to generate new spheres of activity in the economy that will help us deal with this testing time and this time of challenge. The last point I want to make, we must not come always to look to government for every answer in the puzzle. That is not a lesson of development. The lesson of development must be that every citizen and resident must be creative, must look for niche, must look for opportunity, because sometimes you will find them before the government. That is why they have said that private sector and entrepreneurial activity must guide development, because people left with all their creative endeavor could come up with all these things. We had a presentation at the NEOC, NEAC, in relation to online movement, where people have developed instruments which now are going to be in greater demand, will require support services, so we can take heart with respect to that particular matter. So those are the comments I would want to make. I think we just have to be practical, not get unduly fearful, but we must be careful and not harbor anxieties. Again, with every challenge, my way of thinking is that there is an opportunity. The challenge and the prospect about the interruption of supply chain have led us to invest 10 million more for food security. The challenge, the problem, what is the opportunity and the solution? And if each of us begin to think about that, we are going to be at a better place. The challenge to the taxi men, for example, you are accustomed of charging a certain fee to move principally tourists. Are you going to be creative enough at a time when the buses can take fewer people to begin a special targeting at moving local people from point to point, even within the Basti area? There's a challenge, but there's an opportunity. Will our people seize these particular opportunity? Certainly in the context of the restriction, there's an opportunity for people to get into the delivery of good service business. Somebody with a good reputation, with reliability factor on their side, can now carve out a new opportunity for engagement. We have seen how, for example, through partnership with our ICT operators, that people are now going to be forced out of necessity to do more education online. But isn't that also an opportunity for the future? Because it shows going forward, ICT in the end is critical to the viability of nation states. What are all our people out there going to do about this new reality and how we are going to adapt that? What does it say about private people getting involved into tutoring and providing services online, since this pandemic had made it clear that we don't always need a physical space? So some people before, well, I don't have no place to teach. Certainly this is saying you really don't need that physical space.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. We're going to begin our wrap-up in just a minute. Let's see if we can get in one or two calls before we call it a day. Call you, okay, sorry, caller. Probably you waited a bit too long. But, Mr. Prime Minister, I think you answered quite a few of the questions. Let's go back to the phone lines. Call you on the air. Good afternoon. All right, well, that's it. That's it for our calls for today. So just before we go, Prime Minister, could you perhaps recap? I think you answered some of these questions already, but if you could just recap briefly for us the arrangements for instance, the ferries between Nevis and St. Kitts. I don't know if you mentioned that in terms of what the arrangement is for that. And, of course, you mentioned the relaxation of the curfew. Mm-hmm. And the minute I start to talk to you and people think you're leaving, the phone starts to ring. So let's go back to the phone line. Call you on the air. Good afternoon. Oh, boy. I think we may be having a problem with this line because the caller is trying to get through, and the line is acting up a bit. Let's try one more time. Call you on the air. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bacchus.
Ah, good. Yes, Gregory, good afternoon.
Mr. Prime Minister. Good afternoon to you, Dr. Lance, and to all the listeners. Well, I'd like to say a few things very quickly since time is short. First of all, I would like to correct again. We use the Bible, but we must use the Bible correctly. Romans chapter 13 does not give the government, any government, unlimited, unquestioning authority. It is very limited. And that is seen by the fact of verses 3, 4, and 6, also seen by the fact that throughout the Bible, the saints, when government goes against the Bible, the saints disobey those governments and they were locked up, jailed, killed, etc. We even have civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., etc., who went against the laws of the land and got locked up and that sort of stuff. And even slave, because people had slave escape and run away and that sort of stuff, which also was against the law of the land. So saying something the law of the land does not necessarily make it biblical and does not make it necessarily legitimate either. As you have seen throughout history and throughout the Bible, even Jesus himself disobeyed the laws of the land. So we should have a standard as to when we should know when to obey the laws of the land and when we can. And the Bible is that standard that lets us know. Also, I would like to say God let us know the limits and boundaries of government. And he wants us to solve all of our problems within our limits that he has specified upon us, be it on the government, church, family, businesses, etc. Now, where the health of the people are concerned, nowhere in the Bible do you find God giving the health of the people as part of the duty of the government. That he has given to the people themselves and to the private sector, not to the government.
Okay, caller, thank you very much. All right, thank you very much, caller. Let's go back to the phone lines. Call you live and on the air. Good afternoon. Hello?
Yeah, hello, how are you?
Yes, good afternoon.
Hello, how are you?
I heard you saying cut him off, man.
This is a quick question for the Prime Minister. With the strain that the government is under right now with the COVID virus and with them putting out such a great stimulus, is this going to plunge the country back into debt? And second question quickly, are they looking forward past COVID virus? Like after the virus is subsided, are they looking forward ahead of that?
All right, caller, thank you very much. We'll go back to the phone lines. Call you on the air. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon.
Very quickly. I know I'm pushed for time, so I'm going to be briefly. Just want to tell the Prime Minister to continue doing a good job in protecting us. And congrats on having the curfew extend for 6 months, which means that we are safer during these 6 months. Many persons want to open their business. If we do grant some of these businesses permission, I want to encourage them to tell the security force to make sure that people keeping their social distance in the 6 feet. I've been driving around and looking at the media, and I've seen like such as Value Mart is doing it. Rams I see doing it, but still, you need some more security forces to make sure people keep their distances. You know, I'm sorry I didn't have much time to touch on some other stuff, but in a nutshell, very quickly, for farmers, I want to thank him for allowing farmers to attend to their farms as a much more longer time, because we believe that as farmers we should be essential. You know, so there is some work to be done. I know he's listening to the people and he's seeing how best he can adjust to meet the people need. So continue doing a good job, PM, and remember, stay healthy because we need you.
All right, sir. Thank you very much for calling back to the phone lines. Call you on the air. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bacchus, and good afternoon, Mr. Prime Minister, and to the Miss Laws. Prime Minister, good afternoon to Miss Unity, and I just calling to congratulate you. Very good job. And if you have a leader what can't change your mind, he's some serious problems. So thank you to change your mind and listen to the voices of the people and give them extra time out, and the bus drivers, them, more passengers. So continue to do what you have to do. Remember in life, everything you do, you can't please everybody. Some gone sad and some gone bad. Keep on your head and be safe. See you when I see you.
All right. Thank you very much. Our final call for today. Call you on the air. Hello.
Mr. Bacchus, good day.
Yes, sir. Mr. Montserrat.
Yes. And luckily for me, the final call. Mr. Bacchus, we are down from 11 to 8 now. Me would tell you that on Vices, we got full recovery. Good afternoon to the Prime Minister, Dr. Timothy Harris. I want to call you Pastor Harris. And good afternoon to that beautiful lady, the CMO.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Bacchus, I am not quoting. Mr. Bacchus, I want to tell the Prime Minister to tell the nation that health comes before wealth. And while you think about economy and to get the economy up and to get the economy up, nobody knows what tomorrow go hold. So the point about it, are we up here and make our farmers shut anyway? Are we up here and want shut down? And the people and them up to them understand. And I will shut down, I go open Monday, and then I will have that couple days, and then I will go shut down again. Mm-hmm. So secure your life first, because if you not got no life, you not got no economy, and you can't do nothing else. Okay, okay then, Mr. Bacchus.
All right, thank you very much. Caller, you're live and on the air. Good afternoon. Hello.
Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bacchus. Good afternoon, Prime Minister and your team. The person who invoked the Bible, I think it is important for them to understand that Jesus only disobeyed the laws when they were in direct conflict with the laws of God. And I think that person needs to understand that. Dr. Martin Luther King also did it because there was a higher power at stake. And the public needs to understand that. Only if the laws of the country are in direct contrast and conflict with the laws of God. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Call you live and on the air. Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Bacchus.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon.
Luckily, I got in, and Mr. Prime Minister.
Aye.
And good afternoon, and to Dr. Laws.
Good afternoon.
The question I'm asking is, are there any are you gonna give permission at some point in time for the hardware to be open? Because the hurricane season is just around the corner. We're not too sure. Hello?
Yes, hello? We're hearing you.
We're not too sure whether we're gonna order early or late. So I was wondering that maybe you could consider that and give some sort of preference to the hardware so they can open even once, twice a week. This is just something I was asking. Thank you very much, sir. I think you all are doing a damn good job. To help with all who don't like what you're doing, but the country come first. The people come first, along with the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Call you live and on the air. A very good afternoon to you. Hello. Hello.
Hello?
Yes, you're live. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm calling concerning the ferry from Nevis to St. Kitts.
Yes, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, we're listening to you.
I'm calling to find out about the ferry running from St. Kitts to Nevis.
Okay, fine. You get a response in a moment. Let's take another call. I'll call you on the air. And good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon, Mr. Bacchus. Val Thomas here. I have a question.
Val, good afternoon. What happened there now? Val, what sort of phone you have, man? You do call back, because I had nothing to do with that. So make sure you call me back so I can get you there before you accuse me of cutting you off. I don't want a war between Sugar City Rock and Wayne FM. So please give me a call, okay? look out for it. But that had nothing to do with my hands are clean, okay? All right, so let's go to the Prime Minister. Mr. Prime Minister, you have to have the last word. You can't come in now. Let me go back to the phone lines again. Caller, you're on the air. Good afternoon.
Hello?
Hello, good afternoon. You're live.
Yes. I'm trying to find out if any provision has been made for persons who have done work for various ministries in government to get their checks. Some of these work's been done for months and no checks are being written, and persons cannot go out to work and cannot get any monies from the Treasury. Most of these persons are not included in the stimulus package, and they cannot get any money. They have to feed their families. So is any provision being made for persons to go and write the checks for the persons who work on contracts, for the persons who work for the ministries, including the roof project? And so these people cannot get any money, and they're not being thought of. So I'm wondering if any provisions in some of these people who write the checks are said that saying that nobody is advising them to go and prepare any checks.
All right, caller, thank you very much. We're going to take another call. Call you on the air, and a very good afternoon to you. Go ahead, please. Hello? Hello? I think the caller is listening to something else. All right, so that's it. I was trying to get Val in, I don't know. Let me see, one more. Caller, you're on the air. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bacchus.
Yes, good afternoon.
Verlin Warner here, Boys Village.
Yes, Ms. Warner.
Mr. Prime Minister, I'm trying to find out, as somebody just asked, about the hardware, and I'm trying to find out if you're going to allow persons who are doing constructions on the property, if you would allow the workers to come and wrap up. As somebody rightly said, the hurricane season is just around the corner, and I would prefer that the work that has been started at the property be completed, and I can move into it. I know you have a lot on your plate, but if you can look into something like that, even if they got to be off the road by 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock, I would understand, but some sort of leeway I feel should be given to persons who were doing construction on the property so that it could be completed in time for the hurricane season. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Warner. Call you on the air. Good afternoon. Hello? Hello, caller.
Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I would like to say congratulations to our unity government on the fabulous work that they're doing. I would like to also give a big shout out to our healthcare workers, and thanks very much to those who have come in to assist us from Cuba. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for all you do for our people, and I know in everything that you do, our people come first. This is a call from Houston, Texas. Thank you.
Thank you so much for calling. We go back to the phone lines. Call you on the air. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mr. Bacchus.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Mr.
Hardis comes again.
And my apologies for cutting you the last time.
Yeah.
All right.
Mr. Bacchus, I just want to say that this today, the Canadian Prime Minister, have ordered that the border in Canada to America be closed until the 30th of May. And the reason why I'm saying this, Mr. Bacchus, because there are some people and the opposition who's trying to bash the government and bash the Prime Minister for the emergency parliament yesterday and the extension of the state of emergency. We have to do it. The CMO is correct. Mr. Bacchus, we cannot wait until something to happen for us to do things. We have to put it in place so that when it happens, we are ahead of the game. And that's what team unity is all about. Always about the head of the game, Mr. Prime Minister, always ahead of the game. And that's what we are doing. Now, Mr. Bacchus, we in St. Kitts and Nevis have the best stimulus package in the region. I mean, our boss. Mr. Bacchus, a lot of them, they are following us. We come up with the zoning, they're talking about zoning, right? We come up with the closure and the state of emergency, and they're doing the same. Monstrat just spoke a while ago, and he said the same thing. Good day to my good friend in Monstrat. Good afternoon. Have a good day. Blessed, stay safe. They're doing the same thing, Mr. Bacchus. So what Team Unity is doing It's the right thing. And we're calling on everybody to come on board. Stop bashing the government because they are doing it for us. And I like the advertisement of CMO that the nurses out there, stay at home because we are doing it for you. You stay at home. Stay at home for us while we're out there looking after you. Stay at home for us. What's so hard about that to understand? So, the Prime Minister is correct. What he's doing is correct, Mr. Bacchus, because at the end of the day, we'll all say it was good for Team Unity to be in power and to do the right thing to keep us safe. Take care of people. Mr. Prime Minister, let me say to you, no, don't take on about the election. When the time comes, we'll deal with that. Stay focused, stay strong, and let us deal with the situation, the pandemic. Let's deal with the virus that's affecting this country and keep our people safe. And in closing, Mr. Bacchus, I want to say that Team Unity is doing a very good job. I want to big up the Prime Minister and his Team Unity team.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. And we want to thank you very much for calling back. And, of course, we do apologize for cutting you the first time. We're now going to invite closing comments from the Chief Medical Officer because we want to leave the final words to the Prime Minister. So, Dr. Laws, you have the honor of wrapping up from the medical perspective. And one quick question I want to throw at you before you go is, of course, whether or not we're starting to discuss what maybe some of the new realities of life in terms of personal responsibility. You could have all the rules, all the regulations, all the enforcers, but people have to buy in to what is required of them because you can't be watching them all the time. You can't be with them all the time. Dr. Laws.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Bacchus, and you are so right. We need to get buy-in from every single person here in St. Kitts and Nevis in order for us to mount a successful fight against this virus. It's the fight of our lives. I've never lived through a pandemic, and it's going to require all of us coming on board. And so that's why I said earlier, it comes down to each of us looking out for those, our neighbors, our friends, those in our social network, those who have not bought in already. It's our job to enter a discussion with them, encourage and motivate them, help them to understand what it is we are fighting against. Because guess what? This virus is invisible. It's not like a hurricane or a flood where you actually feel the winds and see the water rising. It's a virus that's invisible. And let's be real. Not everybody understands the fight that we are in. And so we need to be patient and tolerant and explain it to those who have not bought in as yet. And it's not impossible. It's just the manner in which we do so. And before I close, somebody asked about the ferry running between St. Kitts and Nevis and the new emergency powers regulations, section 16, exceptions for day of limited operation, subsection 8, speaks to the provision for the buses and taxis and the ferry to operate on these days. So I just wanted to highlight that. And it's also my understanding that the hardware stores too will be allowed to operate in keeping with the social distancing measures on those days of limited operation. And in terms of my closing remark, it is the task of the Ministry of Health to maintain oversight in terms of the government and the Ministry of Health's response to the outbreak. And we endeavor to continue to suppress the transmission of the virus at a very low level so that the demands on the health system is not crippling, and in order for us to save lives. And also to a point whereby we can allow some level of economic and social life. And so we are committed at the Ministry of Health in so doing. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Dr. Laws. Before of course, the hard work that you're doing and the fact that you're here to talk to us. I know the hours are long, and we want to wish you and your team all the very best from all of us here at Win FM, and of course from our colleagues in the media who are also listening in, who are also part of the program. Final comments now from the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. Timothy Harris.
Thanks. Before I get to the comments, allow me quickly to answer the several questions that you allow the callers to put. And I want to thank Gregory, because Gregory is an interesting character. And in every conversation, he invokes the Bible, which is a good thing. I would want to say to him, though, that we would agree that God give us wisdom and would want all of us to exercise wisdom with respect to, and there is nothing that we are requiring of persons to do that would be against the Word of God and in the exercise of their own independent wisdom on these matters. I want to refer to 3 scriptures so that Gregory can research them perhaps for next time. And next time I will perhaps be on Tuesday night, 8 o'clock, Leadership Matters and ZIZ, and I gather Win will also be carrying that program. Romans 13, chapter 13 and 1, Gregory says, "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority," I repeat, "for there is no authority except that which God has established." The authorities that exist have been established by God. The second one, Gregory, is Jeremiah 29 and 7. "Also seek the peace and prosperity of the city, to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper." This is an important one because the language here is popular. It is the prosperity for all agenda. And this was a passage dealing with a people who had difficulties in settling and were questioning the authorities then. And here was the advice: also seek the peace and prosperity of the city. In this context, we are saying, let us pursue the health of the country. He says, "The peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile." It may not be your country, but you are living here. And the admonition then, let us all enjoin to fight for the safety and security of the nation of St. Kitts and Nevis. But to go back more directly to the Bible, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. And the last one is 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 17. Show proper respect to everyone. Love the family of believers. Fear God and honor the emperor. We could well replace the emperor by the state in local parlance. So that's it for Gregory until next Tuesday when we will engage again. Bucky made reference to the matter of the social distancing, how that is important. I want to thank Bucky for being a good media personality, and he has done his own policing. And I want to say, beyond the regulation, it is that if each of us would do what Bucky is doing, observe, give a word of encouragement to others, then we will have no need for the emergency powers. If people will do what they will do, we don't have to impose it, and we want it to come instinctively. I think that was the message from the CMO. But Regulation 18 says that there is a COVID-19 task force which may inspect or visit any business or enterprise to ensure compliance with the provision of these regulations. So where there is non-observance, then action can be taken, and there's a penalty clause which says what can happen: a hefty fine, imprisonment, or if you're a business, you can forfeit all that you would have gained as a result of breaking the law. And to be consulted to assist businesses and enterprises to comply with the provision of these regulations. I've spoken to the head of the NEOC, and I've asked him to begin recruitment of persons so that we could give life to this particular provision and ensure the kind of support needed basically is available. Then we had the call about the hardware store. The CMO made reference to that we expect to see hardware stores being open. Indeed, the specific provision which calls for construction to resume in accordance with the regulation, honoring Regulation 7, social distancing, etc. The natural corollary is that it's the hardware stores that will provide the supplies and the support. And where an entity is not specifically mentioned, the reserve power resides with the Commissioner of Police to be able to provide that support. So, Verlin, your question on the hardware store, we have listened to you. We have listened to others, and hardware stores can be open for Monday, but they must ensure that all of their employees are wearing the mask, they observe social distancing, they have markers to indicate to people the distance, how many persons they will allow in their stores. All those things they have to take care of. The matter of the ferry between St. Kitts and Nevis, I had not been able to look at this in a specific way. Suffice it to say that there's a section of the regulation which deals with domestic travel, and that perhaps will most likely be embodied there. Again, where there's a need for any exception to the rules, the Commissioner of Police can provide, has the necessary latitude to make arrangements that are not otherwise incompatible with the spirit of the regulations that are outlined. And again, because on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, we have a relaxation of the restrictions, at least during the time, a day of limited operations, we would expect that every business, or most of them, including those involved in transportation, would have some flexibility there. Where you are in doubt, you can contact, of course, the Commissioner of Police. The caller who raised the issue of the payment for persons who have contracts with the government, again, we all have to be reasonable, is a good question, but the government itself, by leading by example, was under lockdown, where we had required that the majority of the public servants stay at home unless their work could be executed from home. We have had outstanding response from the Ministry of Sustainable Development. They went out since Good Friday every day to be able to provide the necessary support input to the Treasury in relation to the PAP. And come this Monday, I think it is, over 4,300 beneficiaries of the poverty alleviation support would have benefited from the work. So I thank the Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Elvita Brown, and her staff for their support there. In a similar manner, I could say to the caller that the Treasury Department has begun the processing of payment for contractors who were involved with the roof repair program. Like everything else, the government was in a shutdown mode like most other entities. And those areas that were not critically essential had less staff and less support. As we move into next week, I am advised that this week, a substantial number, almost all that were to be processed have been processed. So you can make the necessary follow-up with Mr. Osbert D'Souza, with Trevlin Stapleton, and of course with the Treasury. But these treks persons went out during the lockdown period to prepare these. So that is the comforting news there with respect to the matter. The shout out to the healthcare workers, we appreciate that, and we want them to know we love and we care for them. We will always owe a debt of gratitude to the Cubans for responding to the provision of specialists, and we thank God that they all came, 34 of them. They were shared between St. Kitts and Nevis, but also they went through the mandatory period of quarantine, and all of them came out of it in flying colors. So we are grateful, and we want to thank Melvina Chapman calling all the way out of Texas to commend the work of the government and, of course, to show how informed she is at this particular moment. The question of the debt, clearly we want to avoid going back to the IMF again. Clearly we want to avoid having any external body being able to determine the policy priorities of the country and of the government. So at all costs, when we took the decision to pay them off the 117 million that the former government left behind, it was to set ourselves a high example that never again should the country be so bankrupt that we have to go a-begging to the IMF. The experience of Jamaica, of Guyana, and almost every country in the world, that the IMF intervention never cures. Ultimately, the people have to make the necessary adjustment. I want to say thank you to Miss Unity for calling in and for her congratulations to the government for encouraging us to continue to listen. The way we have been able to ease the restriction is a reflection that we have heard, and we have sought to respond to those like Granny who are concerned about the issues to do with public transportation. So Granny, we have heard you. The ongoing discussion with the Ministry of Public Transport, some of it are taking place, I believe, in the week to come, but they already have meeting. So we are listening, and where we hear an idea of merit, believe me, internally behind the scenes, we are working to get those things in operation. I don't know if I missed any other question. Are we looking beyond COVID-19? Yes. Yes, we are. That is why we have set ourselves the aspirational goal that we will be the first country to defeat COVID-19 in our jurisdiction. Of course, it is not left to us alone, because while around us the other countries have it, the problem could be that it could easily reoccur, or you could have a spike. And that is why the closure of our borders will have to be in place for a long time in the future. And I don't hear people saying, well, why close the border anymore? Or how will that impact tourism? Because it is necessary. In the same way, the Emergency Powers Act, that is a necessary tool. Thanks to the caller from Mount Strat, we are with you. He raised the fundamental question, how are we going to reconcile what is now two competing issues as we see it being played out? The health of the country and the health of the people are money-making activities. Because that is what it boils down to. Some people anxious to make money, and nothing is wrong with that. Money may satisfy all needs. But the health of the people right now is the priority. And we are saying that for the short and medium and long term, there must be no contradiction, because the health of the nation represents the wealth of the nation. If the people of St. Kitts and Nevis take sick by going out to work, there is no business. There is no money to be made. Let us be clear. We therefore have to preserve the health of every worker. Beyond every worker, every citizen and resident in the country. By keeping them healthy and well, they can become productive citizens. Only if we have healthy, productive citizens in the land can we preserve the viability and the wealth of the country. So I want to thank the caller from Mount Strat for sharing their experiences there and encourage us to stay on the path that we have had. Overall, it has been a very good day. perhaps long, Bacchus, but I think that this program is so informative, and I am happy that I have come. I have come with a star in the personality of our Chief Medical Officer, who really has provided super leadership in the context of the worst pandemic any of us will ever witness again. Certain things in life you only see once. I hope that this will be the first and the last in the lives of many of us, that we will have to go through a pandemic like this that has been so disruptive, so destabilizing to our lives as we know it, to our families, to our communities, and to our country at large. In the end, my job as the Prime Minister is to provide the confidence of leadership, to take sometimes unpopular decisions. It's not easy to say we need a curfew. It is not easy to say don't have a party. But that is part of the burden of leadership. Knowing when to intervene, knowing when to protect people from themselves, because life has to go on, even when some of us are gambling with it. And so I take the responsibility of guiding the nation through its most tumultuous period of time very seriously. I want to thank all those who have been praying for me and my cabinet colleagues and the Governor General, and for the health practitioners. Yesterday I was at a funeral in my community. I didn't break any regulations. And out of there, I saw a mother cry. Ellen Rollins cried. It was not a COVID-19 case, mark you. But I said, if we were to lose focus, if we were to begin to put other priorities and our personal conveniences above the health of the public at large, we are going to enter a season of wailing and gnashing of teeth. And that is why I was inspired when one of the pastors said to me, Dr. Harris, you're doing a good job, and I want to commend you. I wake up at nights praying for you because I know you are only human and you have so many people that you are trying to please, but I want God to guide you. And that was very comforting to me. But even more comforting was when she said, I am remembering Dr. Laws. Oh my, that woman has so much on her hands. And I was indeed thankful because Dr. Laws and her team, it really is a team effort. I see the fulsome support she's getting from Dr. Cameron Wilkinson. And so these are gifted people who have come together, pulling together, giving their very all in a fight that they know we must win at all costs. And all I am asking, let every one of us get involved in this battle to defeat the COVID-19. Set aside the petty politics. It is an all-of-society approach. And everyone, opposition, Christian, Muslim, whatever your place, position, or attitude, we welcome you to help. Help us build stronger structures. Help us with your constructive advice. The CMO, if you're a health practitioner, she will be able to organize the kind of support you can provide if you are willing. The chairperson of the NEOC, he would be responsible for dealing with all other persons who need, as it were, to play a particular role. We certainly are willing, and we have allowed the professional to lead this particular process so that all the requisite skill can come on board. This situation of COVID-19, it has a lot of unknowns. Neither I know it all, nor does the CMO, nor does Mr. Abdias. Every day, we are upgrading our knowledge and information regarding it. Up to yet, the best scientists in the world have not yet delivered the promised vaccine nor therapy. So we are in a learning moment which can change day by day. It is a moving situation, and my government will adapt. When we say 6 months or less, we really mean it, because it's consistent with our aspirational goal to be the first to have defeated it. And once we would have defeated it, there would be no need, at least if we sustain it, for us to get back to the period of emergency powers. But times are changing, circumstances are, and we cannot take any of the tools off the table. The CMO reminded us very early in her opening remarks that she needs, and the country needs, to have the legislative wherewithal, just as it needs the physical wherewithal and equipment to be able to fight this properly. So the motion extending the state of emergency gives our frontline personnel, our medical experts, our police and defense force, and all the other frontline, the tools they need to fight the virus. I won't let the country give up on the promise that St. Kitts and Nevis will emerge from this stronger, healthier, and safer if we work together in unity to realize that dream. And my call today and every day will be that every household, every member of family, on every street, in every village, must stand in solidarity, united to face this extraordinary challenge. It was the WHO director who first described it as a war against humanity. That is where I got the phraseology of the war. It wasn't a magic and it wasn't a conspiracy theory. Yes, Trump also popularized it, because right now in America, they are having to depend upon Defense Powers Act, a tool of war to help fight this COVID-19. Thank you, Mr. Bacchus. In time to come, we will have to honor you and Win for doing a superb job in helping. One of the 6 elements was getting the country ready, providing the information. That is what we have set up the daily briefing, providing that information. Your radio and all the other radio stations that provide information from the legitimate source. That is what the WHO and PAHO is asking. Let us give people the hard facts that help them to make rational decisions. So thank you very much. Thanks again, one and all, for listening to Win and taking good advice. And thank you, Madam CMO, for partnering at this particular moment in this process of public education. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. Of course, we wish you well, sir. And of course, the Chief Medical Officer, of course, I do hope you guys are going to get the time to get some rest as you continue. As you said, the battle is still on, but we wish you well, and thank you very much for being here today. People make the world. That's our program for today. The Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. Timothy Harris, and the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Hazel Laws, on today's program of Inside the News. Thanks to our partner stations. Thanks to Trent Sargent for providing the technical support for this program. I'm Clive Bacchus, wishing you and yours all the very best indeed. Goodbye.
As social distancing becomes the norm of our everyday life, the Cable wants you, our customer, to know that we are here for you every day. Just log in to us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Send us your feedback at email customerservice@thecable.biz. Visit our website www.thecable.net. It's also nice to know you can pay your bills at a distance, online at all commercial banks, or at www.thecable.net/pay. Now's the time to try online banking. It's ultra easy. Call us at 465-2588, 662-7742, or 763-0184. The Cable. We're here for you.